Hello and welcome to the reading room, you little misfits. Welcome back if you are a long-time reader, and welcome for the first time if you're dropping in. This is Mark Reed and the lovely Ember coming to you from the reading room to do debate dissection. We are looking to take apart and find the cause of death for some of the best debates on the internet. And this is a part two. So if you do want the part one, and I think I did forget to link directly to the part one, which I should do, it is in the description. Well, I mean, all you need to do is just go over to Ember, really. That's where all the part ones have been these days. Because I can't choose a debate that's not demonetized into the ground, into the core of the earth. So I can't be trusted. I can't be trusted. How are you today, Ember? How are you doing?
It's all right. We're having as we were discussing before the show started, it's been a violent day. Like
Mm.
we're getting ready to do a dissection, but that's just the
Is that
latest.
violent?
What?
Is that violent?
Dissect? Yeah, you're slicing and yes, it's true. You can't actually injure a corpse, but you are, doing violence upon it or something.
Sure, I would classify it. I don't know. Violence to me is inherently angry, and I've never seen somebody dissect something angrily. I feel that that's sort of counterproductive. I don't know about that one.
Let me
Yeah,
show
I
you
don't know.
debate.
Right, right, right. Just imagine someone stabbing, a corpse to try and dissect it. It's like, oh, I think you've got the wrong idea there, son. Like, maybe. I must admit, like it is a bit violent the way that they have to, um, saw through the rib cage and stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I'm convincing myself here. To be honest with you, you may be right.
It's
You
the best
may
way to
be
win
right.
debates. Let your interlocutor convince themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, and as I was saying to Ember before, it it has been a fantastic day. Sort of, if nothing else, Australia's absolutely rejected Trump style politics, and that feels good. It feels
Hell
really
yeah.
good. Just like Canada, the opposition leader lost his seat, so he can't be part of government at all. He's been absolutely refuted, which is well, I was happy for a little bit, and then the prime minister said, "No, we don't hassle people. We respect people." It's like, yeah, fair call, mate. Yeah, we don't take, yeah, all right, fair call. Um, so I don't know. I think that it's just this push towards conservatism. I think everybody else in the world has seen where it led and went, ugh, that's not great. That ain't great.
Mhm.
That is not the place we want to go. Canada did exactly the same thing. Although unlike Canada, we don't have a minority government. The Labor won the majority government, which is yeah, it's a good sign. It's a healthy thing to do.
Hell yeah.
Yep.
I mean, it's really good to hear from, here in the States, there's people looking for like where we might go, because like
Mm,
preparation to leave is only half of it. You have to have somewhere to go if you have
right.
to leave. And knowing Australia is still a viable possibility it's hard to get
Right.
to from here, but it's good to know it's there, you know?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And sort of, I think that um it's a different culture over here and different cultures throughout the world. And I think that if nothing else, even though people are sick of the two-party system in America, I think that they're really showing that one side is better than the other, kind of thing. Um, you can't muck around with this kind of stuff and expect it to turn out well.
Yeah, there have to be rails on your, because if you go too far,
Yep.
bloop, no more civility, no more civilization. It just
Right. Right.
it's a bad time.
Yeah, yeah, but it's really nice, and hopefully it will. Enough countries aren't going to do the whole let's get on board with El Salvador and Russia and all of these really autocratic country. So hopefully that will put some pressure on, and hopefully it will sort of, you know, guide people in America to thinking, yeah, there is hope. There is something going on. The pushback is real. At least here, the pushback is real, and I think the pushback will be real in America because, I mean, look at the promises. You know, you cannot say promises made, promises kept with the current leader. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, well, they lie about everything else anyway. Why wouldn't they just lie
that's
about their
true.
accomplishments?
I mean, it's incredible. They're sitting there going, "Oh, what an amazing first 100 days," and it is like the biggest disaster that has been seen in America. You know, the biggest disaster ever. And it's sort of like how you can just
I
lie about
know.
reality like that is
Lincoln's
just
first
incredible.
100 days saw the start of a freaking civil war, and they were less crappy than this. It's
Right,
unbelievable.
exactly. You know, because at least Lincoln had a civil war, but at least he worked within the law to do so. You know, like this has just been absolute lawlessness and chaos. It's just incredible. Yeah, less chaos in a civil war. That's an indictment if ever I heard one. But yeah, I mean, enough about you know,
Current events,
upside down democracy.
right? Hey, you get
Right,
sausages. I found that out just moments ago, and I am so
right,
jealous.
right. Yeah, so I was talking about we call it the democracy sausage. It's basically vendors at or a vendor at the you know, like all of the ladies that do baking, and you know, a guy has a barbecue and he'll be cooking sausages for a couple of bucks. You can buy a sausage in a bun or a cupcake or just, you know, just this random food. It's really nice. There'll be people standing around, you know, in front of the barbie just talking, and you know, you buy a democracy sausage. Don't ask me why. Don't ask me why. It's a thing. It's a thing that happens. But actually, the weirdest thing, right? Because we've got preferential voting. I thought about this afterwards. I support an independent in my area who won. So congratulations to Kate
Woohoo!
Cheney for pulling down the victory again in my electorate. Um, so so in there, I never get the how to vote cards. They're basically, so how to vote cards are what the parties give out to say, hey, if you're going to support us, number one goes to us, number two goes to this person, because the parties do vote preference swapping, right? So a party will
Oh.
go, hey, if you give me your twos, I'll give you my twos, right? Like, so as the ranked choice goes down, you don't have to vote like that, but they give out these cards kind of thing. And so I'm like, oh, for the first time in years and years, I'll grab a how to vote card from Kate Cheney, who's an independent. The bloody thing had nothing on but one on Kate Cheney, and then choose the rest yourself. Like, what's the fucking point? I
Just put a
was
big
like,
vote for me on it.
well, it's not a how to vote. It's just I was going to do that anyway. I could have done that myself. I wanted to know what she thought, and she's like, "Yeah, apart from voting for me, I don't really care." And it's just like, okay, sure, whatever. The most worthless piece of paper. That was my only disappointment during the day, and that's a pretty good day if that's the biggest disappointment if you've
It's
got.
true.
Yeah, so usually they rank them down. She just had a one and had the rest blank because she didn't care. It just why you would have that, you know, if you know who you're going to vote for anyway. You wouldn't be taking the card without knowing that you're going to put a one in her square to start with. Like, I had that information already. Anyway, that's my rant for the day.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and welcome to everybody. Back onto the debates. I do apologize. It's been a fantastic couple of days, and I really want to share that with everybody. And one of my best friends, Ember, I really want to share it. And you know, yeah. But the debate between Wood and O'Connor, which I was really looking forward to, actually, I feel like it's not a lightweight subject, but it's lighter than I would like. I would really love to see these two go at, you know, does God exist, or is Christianity good for, you know, civilization, or, you know, did Jesus rise from the dead? It's something more, I guess, ontologically based, if that makes sense, like in actuality based, rather than did Jesus claim to be God, right? I feel that that's sort of, whether Jesus claimed to be God or not, I feel like it doesn't really get to whether he was God. You know, like it isn't really meaty enough for me, and that's
Yeah,
okay. Yeah, that's not. Sorry, I misspoke. It is fine. It's just I would prefer something more meaty, right? Something a
like a
bit more
sausage.
like a democracy sausage. Absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely.
I'm so hungry.
Look, you can have a sausage any day of the week. I don't, you know, I don't, okay,
Mhm, mhm.
okay.
So, yeah, for anybody who missed part
You're
1,
obsessed with this democracy sausage now,
I
aren't you? I
am.
didn't.
It's like the coolest freaking thing. We don't do anything. We get stickers, and not even at every polling place. It's only the ones where the local Department of Elections spends the extra money to buy freaking rolls of stickers that say I voted. And that's the prize. And we don't even have compulsory voting here. So we're trying to lure people in to come vote. And a sticker's what they get. You have freaking sausages.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
it's a
cupcakes.
fantastic idea, but I'm so envious.
Well, I mean, who wants a sticker? Like seriously?
I mean, people like to
You
take selfies with them. They'll like put them on their
Oh, that's
forehead
true.
or
Yeah, yeah,
something,
yeah.
you know.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Fair call. Fair call. And, put it on your car or whatever. Yeah, sure,
yeah.
sure. Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. I don't know. I just, I guess it kind of arose that everybody's got to go and do it, right? It's compulsory, so everyone's got to go and do it. But it's sort of that Australians are very practical in that sense. That hey, if people are getting hungry, like screw it. Why wouldn't we set up a barbie and cook something while we're there? It's a very Australian thing to do. Is just oh, there's a problem. Yeah, what do we do to fix it? Kind of thing. You'd get
Yeah,
lines out the door if you promised a carton of eggs. That's probably true, Alex. Mine.
mhm. It really is.
Mind you,
It's not great over here, folks.
I don't think the election authority's budget would cover that, Alex. That would be, you'd need a lot of you need the national GDP to cover that, carton of eggs for every person.
Oh my, yeah, 100 and some million voters. Oh my goodness, that
Yeah.
would be crazy.
Mm.
C'est la vie. So yeah, in part 1, they did their opening statements. I don't think
Yep.
we even got into the rebuttals because they were 20-minute opening statements.
Correct. I don't think there's an open discussion. I think this is more of a formal debate. It's back and forth. I don't know. I haven't seen it. I purposely avoided watching it. I know that you only saw snippets as you went through, so I'm not sure if there is even an open discussion. But it'll be interesting with the rebuttals.
Mhm.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Ems. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I mean that was the main thing is that they're
Mm.
actually taking turns. It's a more formal, which is weird considering how informal and quasi meaningless the topic is. But okay. Um, I honestly can't remember much of David's other than he's still big mad at Alex about not coming to DebateCon. He didn't
Um,
really have that much that stuck with me. Alex, on the other hand, went through and referenced a bunch of different things and the conflicts in the different scriptures and
yes.
yeah, he's like, yeah, I mean, sure you could say Jesus said the thing, but when you really look into what it means, how it's worded in the Septuagint or what's being referenced or whatever,
Mm.
he
Mm.
doesn't actually say that. Like the best we've
Right.
got is when he says something like, we are all children of the Father, or we are all gods, therefore I too am
Yes.
God.
Yeah, he definitely threw that out that, hey, David could at any time concede that it sort of said we can all be God. And, he could just run away with the debate because Jesus sort of said, hey, I am a God, and it suggests that everybody has the potential to be gods. So meaning gods in that way, you could win the debate. But of course, that isn't in the theology of David Wood. Like that isn't really his theology that, hey, we all have potential to be God. That's reserved for Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So um, it's interesting that he threw out that sort of it's always interesting when somebody throws out something that is almost like a concession of, hey, you win the debate if this is what you mean. I've done it myself in debates, right? I'll say, hey, if you want to say that God exists because the social construct of God exists, well, then congratulations. You know what I mean? Like, that's fine, but I rely on the audience knowing that's not your actual position. Like I trust that they know that that isn't really what we're debating here, because nobody cares if God's a social construct. So David Woods basically was putting out, and what he didn't really put out was a distinct lack of things that Jesus said in the old in the Gospels or in the New Testament. Sorry, he didn't really talk about it at all. What he talked about was other people saying that Jesus was God, and so what really impacted on me, and I'm sorry if I'm spoiling the first one. Oh, look, go back and watch it. It's really worth a watch. It really is. It's over on Ember's channel, which is fantastic. Cannot plug it enough, really. So he didn't actually get to the heart of the matter for me, because if you're saying, did Jesus claim to be God? I think he would have had a slam dunk win if the question was, did people claim Jesus was God? Or was it claimed Jesus was God? It sort of generally, was he, acknowledged? I think he would be fine. I think he would have a really strong case to say, hey, other people said he was God. The question isn't that. It's whether Jesus himself claimed that Jesus was. And David, he hasn't actually bridged that much at all. He hasn't actually shown that at all. He's sort of just said, well, all these people said it. So I think he's leaving the implication there that, hey, if all these people said it, then he must have claimed it at some point, at some random point he must have done it.
But it's weird that he doesn't say that. He just kind of tries to draw the audience in that direction. Like, where could, all these people say this thing which is not the same as Jesus saying the thing, but they must have gotten the idea from somewhere. So clearly Jesus must have told them, or I don't know. It just,
well, I mean, but that's the thing about it. In order for sort of these mythologies to form, you don't necessarily have to have the person saying it. Look at all the things that was said about Elvis, kind of thing. Like, and he never claimed to be any of these things. He just, was Elvis. So it's weird. It's kind of weird that it's kind of weird that the Christian is the one talking less about what Jesus said in this debate. Does that make sense? Like, if you're talking about what Jesus claimed, it's weird that the Christian is the one shying away from what Jesus actually said. Maybe more in the rebuttals, because it just seems like, well, number one, that O'Connor has a way better understanding of the Bible than David Wood does, which is, I wish that was unusual, but it is. Like, it kind of is. Like, when you're an atheist out there in the wild, you will like talk to Christians and suddenly realize you guys have barely an understanding of this book and what it says.
Yeah, I mean, that's often intentional, though, especially here in the United States. I don't know if it's the same in the rest of the world, but here, where we take the evangelism part of evangelical very seriously, you're not supposed to read the Bible on your own. You're supposed to participate in guided Bible studies, where the person with the list brings you through approved passages, because now that it's in English, they can't stop you from reading it, but they can discourage you from reading the parts that they really don't want you to know are there.
Oh, Aunt just shared a couple of these stickers with me. Hold on, I've got to show this, because this is hilarious. I want to get my reaction to this, because hang on a sec. I'm trying to work out how to share Discord. Maybe I should just share my screen. Might be window I can do, right? Yeah, okay. So this is thank you, Aunt Jer, I appreciate it. Wear and share. I voted. Okay, and this is another one. I voted King County. Okay, Yeah, no, I'd prefer it like when I'm standing in line. The promise of a quite frankly shitty sticker. I'm sorry, Archer, it's a shitty sticker. Is not going to sustain me as much as a freaking snag, mate. By the way, we call sausages snags. Don't ask me why. I've got no idea why. We just call them snags. I because of course we do. Of course. What else would you call it? Like seriously. Oh, those are better than yours? Damn, Alex, you've been robbed, mate. You've been
I'm telling
absolutely
you,
robbed.
it's some
Yeah, no,
bullshit.
I'm
Like
hearing you.
usually it's
I
just an
am
American
hearing you.
flag or a check mark, and it just says I voted. That it's like really.
Oh, I mean,
yeah.
I mean, there's that, it's something, but I don't. Yeah, I don't know. Do we have a picture of? Hold on a sec. I think I put this on my Discord. So if you do want to join the Discord for all of the inside scoops regarding Australian democracy sausages, because that's exactly what you're after in your day, right? That's exactly what you're after.
I
Um,
absolutely wanted democracy sausage. Yes.
okay. Didn't I post that? Uh, Jess and I have been posting back and forward about the election kind of thing. It's gone so well. I'm so chuffed. I can't tell you how happy I am. So I apologize, everybody, but I'm very happy. So this is me in front of the old see the old democracy sausage in the background there. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. See what I mean? Look, you can see the boxes there. All of them are blank except bloody one. Like seriously, I was completely, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Freedom Franks. Oh, I love it. Freedom Franks. Nice,
Ooh.
Pinworm. Nice.
How about communism conies?
Conies? Isn't that like a rabbit?
Yes. So it's weird. So there's an island in New York City, Coney Island, where they used to have a theme park. It was called Coney
Right.
Island because it was overrun with conies, as in the rabbit type creature, long ago. But they started producing a different, like the mix on their hot dogs is different. They're not really hot dogs because
Okay.
there's like one meat missing and a different meat in there, and because it's like
Hmm.
white instead of red, people started saying, who didn't know
Okay.
about Coney Island apparently, that it was
Okay.
rabbit in the dog, but it's neither here nor. They're spicier than regular hot dogs and they're amazing. They're the best.
Right. We generally don't call them hot dogs unless they're the American Frankfurt kind of thing,
Mhm.
that red kind of thing. Generally, we'll have barbecue sausages. Do you guys have those? They're just like, European sausages kind of thing?
Sort of like well, there's so many sausages, and I fucking
Well,
love
yeah,
that
yeah,
we
yeah.
have a species that has not only invented the sausage but created a whole evolutionary tree of sausages and
That's
various flavor.
true.
There's salamis, there's bolognas, there's so much stuff.
Pepperoni.
But like
I
yeah,
love pepperoni. It's great.
it's not kielbasa exactly. It's like spicier and with slightly different meats, but it's a sausage that you stick in a bun kind of
Right,
thing. Yeah. I
right.
don't know what that kind is
Yeah.
called actually.
Well, I mean, if you wanna get really Australian, I have had a kangaroo sausage before. I
Mm.
must admit, yeah.
Does it
It's
taste
kind
like
of
rabbit?
gamey, a little bit. It's more like I guess sort of the game kind of thing. It's I mean, it's a sausage. Usually kangaroo's pretty tough, but I mean, it's a sausage. It's nice. It's rich kind of thing. Like it's very gamey though. So yeah. Bratwurst? No, bratwurst is like the big, thick German sausages. I don't know what they're called in America. They're just like sausages that you throw on the barbecue kind of thing. I don't know how to describe them. They're just sausages
Yeah,
to us.
we're very bad at differentiating our sausages. Like the closest you can get to differentiation is Italian or sweet. And that's only with breakfast
Mhm.
sausages. But people won't even say breakfast sausage. They just say sausage. And if it's in the context of breakfast, you know you're getting a breakfast
Right,
sausage. If it's dinner, then you're getting a
right.
different kind of sauce. It's freaking We're very bad at this, folks.
Maybe we need to improve linguistically surrounding food, basically. So
It's true.
if you're joining us for the first time, this is sausage dissection, where we're
Pretty
taking
real.
we're taking apart all the biggest bratwurst, all the most famous sausages in the world. Well,
Y'all are
okay.
making me so damn hungry. Oh my
I'm
goodness.
sorry. No, you're right. You're right. I'm so sorry. Like, look, we've gone off on a tangent where you know
That never
no, but
happens.
Baranowski, that this is not an open stream. I do apologize, but this is sort of a debate review. But thank you for asking in such a respectful way. I really appreciate it, my friend. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, well, let's get into the debate. Yeah, but really, before we got off on that tangent, well, I'm really trying to get off now. I don't want to make you hungry. I really don't. That sucks. I really think that it's been a weird one from part one. Like part one was weird. Not because of you or us or anything like that. It's because basically David Wood didn't address the issue or didn't address the topic really, in my opinion. Not completely. He sort of went tangentially to it. It obviously was connected. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying he was just talking about nothing, but while Alex seemed more than happy to concede the debate if he just admitted that we're all gods, which is just weird. Like it just was a weird thing to do. And yeah, sausage inspection. No, please, no, Chrissy, come on, no. Okay.
Although I would love to see a Christian concede that we're all gods. I mean, in some ways, that would be kind of an insult, right? Because, we exist, we can be demonstrated to exist, we're capable of altering the physical world. In a lot of ways, we have way more power than any god. So calling us a god would be sort of a diminishment. But still.
It depends because I mean, it wouldn't fit, like humans at the moment wouldn't fit my definition of a god kind of thing. I think that you'd have to, my definition, you'd have to be able to transcend, alter, or and somehow ignore natural laws, which obviously humans can't do. That is not possible.
Oh, like
for us.
flying or bringing back the dead or sending people to the moon? Things like that?
Well, yeah, but like we're talking about what humans can do at the moment. No one can, resurrect the dead at the moment. Like that doesn't happen. But it's basically that they're saying we have the potential to be gods kind of thing, like Jesus. And I think that's where the major bone of contention lies, that Jesus is this special thing that humans will never measure up to. We're like rags or whatever the hell they say, that they will never say, hey, we have the potential to be as good as Jesus, right? That is something I have never heard a Christian say, nor I don't think I'll ever hear a Christian say. I think you could sort of go, I think you could be a Christian and say that, right? I think you could follow the teachings and believe in the divinity of Jesus. It would be certainly a very unorthodox Christian, right? Like somebody that very weird type of Christianity, but I think you could do it and still say, hey, humans will be God someday.
I
Right?
mean,
Do you think?
I could see that. Like there's a few fringe religions that some of them involve Jesus as an idea, some of them don't. It doesn't matter. But the general thrust of the theology is that whether there was any specific god or group of gods or whatever, reality exists to eventually generate even better gods. Like not only will our descendants, assuming we survive, will they be what we would consider gods, but they'll be even better than that.
Right.
It's a fun thought.
So would somebody be a Christian if they think that ordinary humans could surpass Jesus? That's a good one. It gets a bit fuzzy, doesn't it? It gets really into what your definition of a Christian is. Yeah, that's a bit of a weird one, mate.
We do love the
Interesting.
weird stuff.
And look, Deviant, I'm just going to write in chat now. Blame me. I don't care, mate. I don't care, Deviant. Blame me, mate. I'm fine. Yeah, that's cool. I apologize.
In fairness, I did bring up the sausages once we were actually on the air.
Oh, look, Look, I could tell that you're absolutely fascinated. It is something that, I think we take it for granted. You know what I mean? Like, I think we really do go, oh, well, that's normal. And everybody around the world is like, what are you talking about? Like, what are you doing over there? And it's like, oh, that's normal.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes every country, every culture, every people group all have their unique idiosyncrasies,
Yeah,
and I think that's a
yeah,
big part of the reason that conservatism has taken off is because people see this push towards global community, and they perceive it as a threat to their individual communities. Like we see big box stores come into town, and all the mom and pop shops end up being closed, and they see our community is losing its sense of self. Nobody feels like a
yeah,
member of the group. We're just cogs in the national or international machinery, and they hate it. It scares them. And I get that. But
yeah. That's
they're
understandable.
yeah, they're going about it a weird way. Like make
Yeah.
different customs, adapt,
Well,
embrace what makes your people special.
right. Right, and I think that, but what you're describing is sort of the corporate globalism rather than a cultural
Hmm.
globalism. It's really describing the corporatization of the entire world under sort of a McDonald's on every single corner, and it's all exactly the same.
Uh-huh.
Um, in actual fact, the most successful businesses are the ones that cater their companies to the culture of the location because they are so different. And certain companies have been very good at doing that, like McDonald's. Others haven't been, like Starbucks. They've absolutely failed miserably trying to adapt their corporations to it. But I like different cultures. I like seeing different cultures. I like seeing the things that they do, and I think that um, America's isolationist policy, I think they're just scared by, um, this whole idea of other cultures and the rest of the world. I think they've been on top for so long, and like, trust me, America has been on top financially for so long that any kind of difference scares them. I'm not 100% sure. You could be right. You could be right.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
many different levels. People scared the brown people outnumber the white people soon, which is true. But why is that a problem, though? It just there's a bunch
it
of different
isn't.
factors to it. But I think the reason it resonates with small town voters, grandmas and grandpas, they remember the days of town dances and sock hops and ice cream socials, and those don't exist anymore
Right,
because of
right.
globalism or whatever, you know?
Yeah, I just don't get why you'd be afraid of, say, for instance, refugees and stuff. They fled from problems in their own country and come to yours. Why would they want their new country to be the same as the one that they fled? These people will uphold the values that they fled to, not the values they fled from. That's the
Mhm.
whole point. Like, I don't understand what the threat is, because when you know we had one leader, she's her name was Jackie Lambie, and she was kind of like, Muslims bad, all of this kind of stuff. She won her seat, but in her credit, she went out and talked to some of them, right? And talked to these people and actually interacted with all of the people in his community. Completely changed her mind. She was absolutely fine. She's like, okay, I'm on board with all the science I've been told. I'm on board with, I've talked to these people and I understand them way better now. Complete acceptance of all of these people, because once you talk to them, you understand that, hey, they want a, you know comfortable, happy life, a content life. They want the best for their kids. They want a strong community with people taking care of each other. You know what? They're not after, you know your staff. They just want a good community like everybody else. They're no different than us. They just might have some funny things they do because they come from a different culture. Who cares? It's beautiful. I love it. Have
Mhm.
we tangented enough? Have we tangented? I feel like we've got another couple in the barrel somewhere. Like
Oh, it'll be coming, I'm sure.
yeah, yeah. But this debate is, I'm enjoying it. I think it's a bit weird. just because of the way that it's going, but I am enjoying it. So I will say that. And it's wonderful to be here with you, Ember. I
Yeah.
always enjoy our time together, and wonderful for everybody to join us. I feel really happy today after the great day yesterday, and I'm here today with all of you guys. It's fantastic.
I got a sausage.
Absolutely
Of course you
fantastic.
feel good.
No, I didn't have a sausage. I was
You
having
didn't even
lunch, so I
all that
no,
sausage and you didn't even have one?
no. No, look, Lynn and I have a tradition. We vote and then we go to lunch and we just basically bitch about everything that happened, during the election time, and it's a catharsis. It gets it out of our
Okay.
system. So it's a vote and bitch session, right? That's basically what we do. So it's been tradition for us, and so I don't want to ruin my appetite by having a democracy. So, but I mean, I'll have one occasionally. It's fine. It's just, yeah, I didn't yesterday.
All right. So that is Alex O'Connor's 20-minute opening. So David is going to go back up to the podium. He is going to do a 12-minute rebuttal round.
All right, thank you, Alex. In my opening statement, I showed that in the first century, there was an interesting discussion within Judaism about the two powers in heaven. They had various ways of dealing with this. And we can see why when we read passages like Genesis 22, the story of Abraham and Isaac. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. Here I am, he replied. Then God said, take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah, sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you. So this.
Wait, what's this got to do with Is he going to try and say this is a prophecy for Jesus? Because I've heard that before, and it's not very reputable among sort of scholarship that is a prophecy for Jesus. Mostly because it's confused, right?
It's like a syphilis hallucination, but that's a side thing. I think he's going to try to build off what he was talking about in his opening, where it talks about God and the Lord and the angel of the Lord, as if they're all the same thing or interchangeable, or there's confusion and therefore Jesus or something. I think that's where he's going. Is it starts out like God said, and then later when Abraham's hand gets caught, it's the angel of the Lord who stops him.
Right. But that can and that was a lot of that was in part one, where he was sort of saying, hey, it says God is doing this over here, and then it says God's doing the same, something different somewhere else. But as we pointed out in that, a lot of the time when they said that the Lord was doing something, they may not have been talking about like God individually doing it, that his angels were like, they would say, hey, that is the Lord. The messenger of God is the same as God, basically. So just because God is talked about as multiple people doesn't mean that Jesus has to be a God. Does that make sense? Like it can be, when we say, for instance, the president told me to do this. It may not have been the president directly, right? It could have been, a aide of the president comes up to you and goes, hey, the president wants you to do this kind of thing. And just so like, well, the president told me. Well, yeah, but not directly.
My orders come from the White House, and you're just meant to assume
exactly.
It's the president. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So yeah, hello, Dave.
God saying to Abraham, take your son. Verse 11, but the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham, is when he starts to do it. Here I am, he replied. Do not lay a hand on the boy, he said. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. So this.
Yeah, this is a gruesome story. Just a bit of a tangent in the chat if you feel up to it. It is a gruesome story. It's basically God saying, or the angel, we don't know which, sort of saying, hey, you've got to kill your only child. And he goes to do it. And then he goes, well done, you were willing to kill your child to show your allegiance to me. Well done, you. Is it though?
Yeah, like what's the moral here? Be so obedient, or is it trust in God, or whatever?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of speculation about these verses, there's a very strong argument to be made that this shit would have added on after the fact, that in the original version, he did sacrifice Isaac. But then you get to wondering, people of the time would ask, well, then how could the nation of Israel be his descendants if he killed off his only son? And they went, oh, shit. And so they retconned it and made it so God said, wait, don't actually do it. I was just testing you for real these.
Yeah, or it just never happened at all. It's just mythology kind of thing, although the whole idea of sort of child sacrifice at that time was very contentious, and there was some evidence that there was some of it going around, but it usually was the I believe it was the Carthaginians, what were they called, the people from sort of northern Africa, like Carthage.
Carthage, I don't think was founded at the time Genesis was written, or in oral tradition.
Well, I mean, from that area kind of thing.
Yeah, there was the Kush people in the Nile River Valley, but I'm not sure what the group was to the west of them.
Carthaginians, yeah. There was a sort of no, Carthage was around. I mean, Carthage was a very, very old civilization.
Well, they were a colony of the Phoenicians. Carthage was founded in 814 BCE. And when was Genesis written? Between 500 and 350 BCE. So yeah, Genesis is newer than Carthage.
Right, and just because Carthage is there was, we don't know this for sure, absolutely don't know it for sure. But when they're talking about children being sacrificed to Moloch, there is a suspicion that Moloch isn't a god. It's the practice of like sacrificing a child. The whole leverage against Israel attacking a lot of the other Canaanite tribes was that they were performing this sacrifice, but we suspect that they kind of all did it, right? Like Abraham was very readily willing to perform the same thing. So it raises the question, how were the other tribes different than Israel? And it seems to be that they weren't really that different. They were just different tribes. That's all that happened. They basically had exactly the same culture. There was no difference between them, really.
Yeah, the same pantheon for a very long time.
Yes, yeah, and that goes into a whole. It's wild that some Christians are just like, no, it wasn't a pantheon. It's like there's so much evidence that it was. I'm sorry. There's so much evidence.
Yeah, I mean,
the angel
Yahweh is mentioned in the pre-Canaanite stories of the region as one of El's 70 sons, and some of the other gods that are in the Bible stories that are also some of the 70 sons that Yahweh fought with. Like, there's a whole mythology, and Yahweh is in it with all these other gods. What do you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Where's my thing? Sorry.
Of the Lord, saying, you haven't withheld from me your only son. And it was God who ordered Abraham to do this. So we have situations like this, and I argue that Jesus enters the discussion when they're confused about the two powers in heaven and claims to be one of them. And so there we look at what Jesus says, what Jesus does, what his friends say, what his friends do, what his enemies say, and what his enemies do. Alex seems to suggest that there could be some sort of angel or something like this, or even a person who's endowed with this kind of divine authority. I got problems with this even here in Genesis. So look at what they said. Then the Lord, Genesis 33, then the Lord said to Moses, leave this place, you and the people you brought up out of Egypt, and go up to the land I promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I will send an angel before you and drive out the Canaanites, Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites. Go up to the land flowing with milk and honey, but I will not go with you because you are stiff-necked people, and I might destroy you on the way.
Well, number one is, well, hold on a second. Isn't God omnipresent? How could he not go with them if he's omnipresent? Just throwing that out there. Like, is he like able to be everywhere but can withhold his presence? I don't know how that works. Just wondering. And
also, David kind of fails on his Bible there, because the Moses stuff is Exodus. Genesis 33 is where Jacob meets Esau. Just a tiny detail, but still.
You got the Bible verse wrong? Are you serious?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, no, Moses is not in Genesis at all. Like, that's, Noah in Genesis. Yeah, Jacob meets Esau. Okay. Oh, David. Maybe it was supposed to be a different verse.
I wonder if he means Exodus 33.
Does he? Probably.
I'm checking now. The Lord said to Moses, leave this place, you and the people brought up out of Egypt. Yeah, and I might destroy you on the way. I might destroy you. Screw you guys, I'm going home. So yeah, it's supposed to be Exodus 33.
Okay, but I mean, yeah.
I guess minor detail, but he's the Bible guy in this. Like,
I know. Like he's against an atheist, and like if the atheist made a mistake, you'd be like, silly atheist, you got it wrong. But this is kind of really embarrassing. I'm sorry, David. You should really, if you're going to bring up a Bible verse, you should probably get it right. Holy crap.
Who was accompanying them and guiding them? Well, the angel of the Lord. But here he says, I'm not going with you this time. So this is the Lord speaking. It's not the angel of the Lord. And you say, oh, this is the Lord. This is the Lord speaking. This is the Lord speaking. Says, I'm not going up with you now. When it was the angel of the Lord who was accompanying them. So these are the sorts of things you have. And people try to figure out how to deal with this. And they came up, again, with all sorts of ways. And Jesus entered the picture and claimed to be one of the two powers in heaven.
What?
Jesus said, okay, so that's a non sequitur to me, like, because the Lord said, hey, I'll send an angel to guide your way, but I won't be with you because you're stiff-necked people. How does that relate to Jesus? He sort of said, hey, there's this passage in ostensibly Exodus that has God and, being differentiated as not being there with them. But I don't understand how that relates to Jesus claiming to be a god.
I'm not sure. He hasn't really put it together, but he seems to be trying to imply that the angel of the Lord being distinct from the Lord means that there is a second equivalent power, even though the angel is described as clearly being subservient to and taking orders from the Lord, but details. And therefore, that angel must be Jesus somehow.
That does not
for
follow
some reason.
For me. That does not follow for me. Like, you're basically saying, hey, there was a hierarchy within this heavenly body that you had God, and the angels did what God wanted. They're servants of God. And therefore Jesus was to come along later. Is he sort of saying that maybe he's trying to make this analogy that Jesus is like, no, that doesn't work because the angel wasn't the Lord. I don't get this. I really don't. This is a very strange argument. It seems to me like a non sequitur. It does not follow to me.
So what Jesus says, we went through 3 examples of Jesus claiming to be one of the two powers. He's the divine son of the Father.
Well, no, you did not go through Jesus claiming that. You went through other people claiming that. That's the important thing that David's brushing over. He didn't really go through Jesus claiming anything much at all. What he did is he pointed out that other people have interpreted his passages this way.
Yeah, because if he could demonstrate that Jesus actually did say that, that would be the end of the
Right.
debate. It answers the
Right.
question. Jesus did claim to be God. There we go.
Right.
We're done. He
Yes.
didn't do that.
So I feel this is very sort of I don't know what kind of a, whether it's an actual fallacy or not, but he's kind of making tangential sort of statements. He's making statements that are not the crux of the issue. And then later on saying, well, I've already shown this, when I don't think he has. I don't think he's actually managed to cross that chasm between what other people said about Jesus and what Jesus claimed. I really don't think he's bridged that one. It's kind of weird for him to sort of authoritatively say, "Hey, I showed you how Jesus claimed to be one of the two divine things." I don't remember that
Yeah,
at all.
it hasn't been demonstrated, and it's
Right.
I don't know that it's necessarily a fallacy per se. It's illogical, but I think it's just more rhetoric flavored, where
Yes.
I mean, a lot of apologists do something similar, although they're usually a little more subtle about it, where they will vaguely imply something, talk for a while, and then reference the thing they implied as if it were a demonstrated fact.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I've noticed that with flat earthers as well. Like, seriously. Yeah.
He's the Lord of King David, and he's the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven. And we saw how people reacted to him claiming to be the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven. In response,
That's right. You have a lot of stuff about the Son of Man, but I think Alex showed that Son of Man was not the same as Son of God. Like, and he's talking about the Son of Man being on the right hand of the throne, like he's talking about somebody else. Like, at no point does Jesus reference himself when he's talking about the Son of Man. He sort of says the Son of Man will be coming, and the Son of Man will do this. It's a very weird way to talk about yourself.
Right. And I think that's the whole crux of it. Is David is assuming that when Jesus spoke prophecy, which was clearly about another person, according to David, he was talking about himself.
Yes.
And I mean, not only do you have to demonstrate that, but also fucking duh. But nobody's actually overtly said it. Like, David, I get why you think that, because that's what you were taught through church tradition and generations upon generations of doctrine and dogma. But that isn't what it actually says. If you look at the text as it stands, Jesus isn't saying this is me. You're assuming that. You're putting that onto the text, and it's just not there.
It would be like me saying, in the future there will be a content creator who will analyze the debate. It's like, am I talking about me? No, I'm referencing somebody else, right? Like, I'm not talking about me, or else I would be saying I would be coming to analyze. It's just weird to assume that. And I guess you can make that assumption, and you're right. It's probably based upon a lot of church tradition. But to the person that isn't already sort of really invested in that church tradition about things, it sounds nonsensical. It sounds like such a leap to go from, oh, well, he's referencing the Son of Man as someone to come, as he's referencing himself in the third person. It sounds weird.
Yeah, the blinders of people who are brought up in belief. It's shocking. All my life, I'd encountered people even in the first years of school who were like, "Oh, come to church with us, come to church with us," and I'd be like, "What do you believe?" And they'd say something, and I'd be like, "Don't you see how those two things don't actually have anything to do with each other?" Or they that's what they were taught to believe. And it never occurred to them to question those assumptions. And that's true for the adults as well. They just, it just doesn't cross. I mean, we all have blind spots in our reasoning where we don't question an assumption that we grew up with. But those of us who are a bit more skeptically inclined, especially people who end up leaving the faith because they've deconstructed and they've started to notice these things that don't really make sense, we tend to be a little bit more critical. But we still have to, there's these in peer reviews in science, because by definition, a blind spot is something you're not aware of.
Yes.
We still need other people's perspective to show us where we're missing
sure.
something obvious. But
yeah,
it just,
well, that's what the deconstruction process is for. It's like, what do I actually know about this kind of stuff? You know, you hear it all the time when the instance, that the example that I was thinking about was actually sort of people that think that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and Paul wrote the Gospels. For sure, we know that for sure. And you'll come across these people, and it's like, wait, you don't know that they're anonymous? Like, we don't know that for sure. And they're like, no, we absolutely know that, you know, like they've been signed or something. And you're like,
it's such a wild thing. Like when people say, oh, we know it was Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and they also claim they were written by eyewitnesses. I'm like, hold on. You mean to tell me that Luke was written by a man named Luke, who came with Paul to talk to the people who were because he wasn't an eyewitness? Like, these two things they cannot go together, you know? If it was Luke, he was not an eyewitness, period.
Right. Yeah, and sort of, but then you talk to, you know, I mean, I've had these conversations, and the you know, the average flock will sort of go, oh no, it was absolutely written by these people. And then you talk to the person that's been through seminary, like a pastor or something of that same church, and they'll go, yeah, we don't know that for sure, because they know, then just not relaying that to their congregation, right? Like, they're not telling their congregation this kind of stuff, because of course some questions are raised, you know, like how can we trust this if we don't know who wrote it? That's a pretty obvious kind of question. But yeah, this is sort of a very weird thing. I you know, wow.
Once Alex was quoting, he quoted Psalm 82, and then Jesus using this passage. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. So they accused Jesus of claiming to be God. Jesus answered them, is it not written in your law, I have said you are gods? If he called them gods to whom the word of God came, and scripture cannot be set aside, what about the one whom the Father set apart as his very own and sent into the world? So Jesus is sent into the world, according to this passage. Why then do you accuse me of blasphemy because I said I am God's son? This is not, and I have no idea how you would ever read the Gospel of John like this, let alone anything else Jesus said. This is not Jesus saying, what, you're misunderstanding. I'm just a regular dude. Again,
well, he's basically, to me, and I think that Alex is right, I have said you are gods. He's basically saying no one's a regular dude. And this is where it's tripped up David, because he could just say, oh yeah, Jesus claimed to be God, and he claimed everybody else was God as well. Debate over.
Yeah, I mean, holy crap. It's even worse than he's straw manning Alex's argument, because the way it is written, at least in this particular translation, if he called them gods to whom the word of God came, first of all, Jesus, not the word, whatever the fuck that means. But also, if we're talking about scripture, he's clearly referencing scripture. Is it not written in your law? Then the word of God coming to someone means a Jew, a religious Jew. So being the son of God in this context just means his father has read the Torah. Like, that's all he's saying is, you know, I'm the son of God in the same way anyone who is religious is, according to the scriptures.
And I mean, he could just be talking about a descendant of the tribe of Israel, like the Israelites. That's possibly what he means as well. You know, like, I don't, you know, just instead of saying God's chosen people, he could say one of God's sons, kind of thing, like the special people that Christianity loves so much. I don't know. I mean, it's just, I don't think this is working how David thinks it's working, that you know, he's put up this up, but I don't. What
Well,
about the one whom the Father set apart at his very own and sent into the world?
I think he feels trapped by this verse because it's the
Right.
one place where Jesus comes the closest to saying, I am God because I'm God's son and therefore have identical properties or whatever, which is not the same thing, but it's as close as it ever gets. But he can't invoke the passage without invoking the whole passage. Alex will
Right.
definitely not let him get away with that.
Yeah.
And Alex, being Alex, headed him off at the pass by bringing it up first. And it just, I mean, so this whole passage hinges on what do we mean by blasphemy? The modern term has a few different meanings depending on which
Right.
subculture you're in. But
Right.
the ancient Jews, the ancient Hebrews, the Israelites of the time, blasphemy had a very specific meaning. It meant giving credit to another person that properly belongs to God.
Right.
And so saying that you are a child of God in the same way everyone else who is religious is a child of God,
Right.
that's the
Not
opposite of
blasphemy.
blasphemy. That's giving
Correct,
God
yes.
credit for your existence.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. No, I would agree with that. And it seems to be saying from what I'm reading that Alex is correct. Like, I have said you are gods. If he calls them God, people that have received the scripture, and you have to believe the scripture, then we're all God's sons and daughters. So why are you calling me a blasphemer when you're saying that I am God's son? Like, that doesn't make, like, I get what Alex is saying, and it seems to make a lot more sense than what David seems to be implying, which is him saying, I am God's son in a very literal sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a wild passage because Jesus goes through this. I mean, they didn't have like a structured argument, a syllogism in the culture at the time, but this is pretty damn close to a syllogistic argument where he's like, scripture says this, I'm quoting scripture, how dare you accuse me of blasphemy because I'm just saying what you say I have to believe.
Right. My Unfinished Sock donated $2. Thank you so much, My Unfinished Sock. Says, don't make dumb apologetic arguments, like and share. Look, even if you weren't planning to make dumb apologetic arguments, you can still like and share. I won't hold it against you. You don't have to have that intention. But thank you so much, Sock. Really appreciate it. From an obvious sock account, just saying.
It's true.
Obvious sock account is obvious.
And if this were the only verse in there, maybe, because if given the rest of what we read in the Gospel of John and the rest of the Gospels, Jesus is not claiming to be a regular guy. He's using a legal technicality here that they should be aware of. They're saying, hey, here's what you're claiming. You're claiming to be the Son of God. This means you're claiming to be equal to God and so on. And therefore, this is blasphemy.
No, bad David. That's not an entailment. So he's doing that thing where he's starting with his conclusion and trying to build a case to reach it from nothing. No, being the Son of God does not automatically entail you are identical to God. In fact, that's an incoherent proposition.
Yes.
In every culture, in every history, in everything that the people of the time had been exposed to, even if they've heard from the ancient Greeks, even if they've heard from the ancient Persians and Babylonians, which they have because they stole half the Babylonian myths, the children of gods are demigods. They're not identical to the gods. What do you mean, David?
And usually in all of these pantheons where they have the children of gods with humans, it seems to be a way to explain why a human being is a great human being, like Alexander the Great, for instance, or Achilles, or any of these people that seem to be very capable human beings that are gifted and talented. They sort of go, well, it's a child, obviously they had a god for an ancestor kind of thing, some kind of explanation behind it. But that doesn't mean they were equal to the god, right? That under no way, shape or form were they equal to the god themselves. So no, that doesn't follow. It's
just ancient X-Men.
Yeah. I mean,
that's a series for History Channel.
Yeah. History Channel. Yeah. It's so accurate to history. Sure.
Response is, well, in the Psalms, God calls people Elohim. Therefore, you can't just say calling someone some divine title is blasphemous and deserves a death sentence. You have to show that it's that the title is not from God, that it's not true, that it's false. Have you done that? No. Okay, you can't kill me. You can't just say there's a claim and therefore we will kill you over it. So it's a legal technicality. Again, if you're somehow reading this as, see, Jesus is just claiming to be a regular guy. Wow.
He never said that. He never said that. So what Alex's argument was is that Jesus is claiming to be a special child of God, but saying that other people have the potential to be the same as him. Right? That's what he's saying.
It seems to me that David is trying to claim that Jesus is a lawyer in addition to being the Messiah and yada. I mean, I suppose if he is the incarnation of God, he's all the things. But lawyer is only one step removed from Satan. I mean, Satan literally is the lawyer, right? In
kind of
the ancient traditions, he's the adversary. Yeah.
Well, I mean, he's more like a prosecutor than anything else.
Yeah.
But sure, yeah. God's prosecutor.
Divine DA.
Oh, wow, yeah. But I think that he's also strawmanning Alex's position here and saying, well, if Jesus says all of you can be God as well, then he's just saying he's an ordinary person. But that doesn't necessarily follow. He could be saying, hey, I am a special person, and all humans have the potential to be the same as me. But that doesn't mean he's claiming to be God, right? Like, this is the thing. You can't just say, well, if he's not claiming to be ordinary, he is claiming to be God. That doesn't follow, because you have a whole wide range of exceptional properties. Like, he could be claiming to be a prophet, he could be claiming to be a demigod, he could be claiming to be God's right hand without actually being a god. Like, there is a vast range in between nothing special and God there, right? Am I missing? Does that sound right to you? Like, he's just sort of saying, hey, if he's not saying he's God, he's saying he's absolutely ordinary.
Dichotomous thinking, black and white. This is the
right?
way.
Yeah. So black and white fallacy, if you're not aware of it, it's basically sort of this, when you put out that it's either completely one thing or completely other, when there are varying levels in between. I've usually often referenced it when sort of presuppositionalists would say, you're either you have absolute knowledge or you don't know anything at all, kind of thing. And that isn't really the case when it comes to knowledge claims that we make. We base it on varying levels of certainty. What would be a good example? It would like be saying, well, if we can't stop illegal guns, then we might as well have no laws on them, kind of thing. Then it's pointless to have laws. And that is black and white thinking. It's a fallacy, because obviously we can have some controls that will help, even though there's still guns out there. It's not a good way of thinking. It's very irrational to think that way. And I think David is making that mistake. He's sort of saying, hey, if Jesus isn't claiming to be God, then you're saying that he's nothing special. And that is not what Alex is saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's either the universe came from nothing or it was made by Yahweh with Jesus and the assistance of the Holy Spirit. Those are your only two options. It couldn't possibly be anything else.
Right. And my unfinished journey for $6.66, the perfect amount. Hail Satan. They said, you are claiming to be God. Why didn't Jesus say, you misunderstood? Let me clarify. I always took that as the author implying JC equals God.
That is kind of what he said, just in more words.
That is what he's saying. He's sort of, they said, oh, you're committing blasphemy. And he's saying, no, I'm not. When I say the Son of God, I'm talking about anybody that has the scripture, that is a follower of the scripture has come to. Oh, and Hail Nero and all that. Yeah, no, I got you. Your post was unfinished, so it's my unfinished super chat. Got him. got it. Yeah, my unfinished super chat. I'm sorry, buddy. Anyway, yeah. So I think that is exactly what he's doing. But of course, he's not going to use the language of our time. He's going to say, "Hey, let me clarify what I mean by being a son of God." You know, that this is the name that the Old Testament, you know, but he's basically saying this is the name that the Old Testament said, that we're all sons of God. And that is what I'm referring to. I think he is saying that they misunderstood.
Yeah, and in fact, this is possibly the most straightforward Jesus ever is in all of Scripture, because usually when he tries to explain to people that they're being idiots, he tells a story about farmers throwing seeds into cobblestones or some random crap, you know?
It's very vague. Like, he is very vague in the Bible. He doesn't really say anything outright.
All right. So we have John 17:5. And now, Father, glorify me in your presence with the glory I had with you before the world began. Why? Alex quoted John 17 to show that Jesus is just claiming some regular relationship that we can all have with God or something along those lines. What does Jesus say in the same chapter that Alex is quoting? And now, Father, glorify me in your presence with the glory I had with you before the world began.
Well, that kind of continues to imply that Jesus is a separate entity from God and is therefore not claiming to be God.
Well, it's difficult to know. I mean, this is one of the issues with the Trinity, that it seems to be this convenient thing that when they need it to be three different individuals, it is. When it needs to be one individual, it is. So I have trouble with the Trinity. Like, I can't even wrap my mind around it. And one of the big things that occurs that really annoys me is that every time I ask, they tell me to see somebody else about it. You know, they'll say, have you read this? Or have you seen this? Or have you taken this person? And then I'll go off and dutifully do it and find out what they say about it. And it still doesn't make any sense. And, you know, if they're a person I can question, I'll take them up on it and I'll say, I will go see this other person. And like, I feel like if I follow this long enough, it's going to chain around to the original person. You know, that, hey, my explanation doesn't sit with you, try somebody else's. Now, I understand this, right? If you've ever done programming, some concepts in programming are very hard to understand, and you need a different perspective on it. I'll give you an example, for instance. Ember, do you do any coding at all, or have done coding in the past?
It's been a
little bit, maybe.
Time.
Right. So do you know what object-oriented coding is, or programming is?
Not by name.
Okay, so there's this whole idea of objects, right? And I could not, like, getting your head around what they are, how they work, and how they're implemented is very difficult, right? So you have these instances of things, and they have these functions within them, and so basically, you know, trying to understand what they were. They were trying to explain it, and I just wasn't getting it. They were talking about sort of, you know, arrays and you know, sort of database operations and things like that, and I just wasn't understanding what these things were. And they said, well, go talk to this other person, this other, you know, teacher, because they may explain it in a better way. And so I talked to them, and he's like, have you ever played D&D? And I'm like, yeah, I have. And he's like, so imagine it's a character sheet, right? And you've got multiple character sheets kind of thing. How it's arrayed is the object, and then the instance of it is the character. And so you can have all of these, you know, the different functions are the information on the character sheet. And I'm like, holy crap, that makes sense. So you can multiply these objects, but they each have their own properties. Really fascinating stuff. It's really interesting for me anyway. Anyway, long story short, that clicked with me because I knew what he was talking about, right? Whereas the other person was talking about all kinds of nonsense that I didn't understand. And this isn't a fault of one or the other. It's just some people explain it in such a way that you understand. So I'm always on the lookout for someone to try and explain the Trinity in a way that frigging makes sense. And they always go back to, you know, things like, what's the last one I heard? I think it was from Joel from that Think Institute, the pre-sub. He's like, I got to put that up actually, because he's like, oh, well, it's like you're Mark, but you are mankind as well. And I'm like, well, I'm a part of mankind. Like, I'm not 100% of mankind. I am one, you know, if you're talking about humankind, basically, I'm 1/8 billionth of mankind.
Yeah,
You know,
the
so it's
characteristics are not identical, which is what's required by
right,
the Trinity hypothesis, I
right,
suppose. Scenario.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then he's like, "Oh, well, have you ever heard of this book?" And maybe go off, and it's just like, yeah, the redirect. It always comes for the Trinity. I don't, you know, wow, 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 wow.
I mean, it's so wild because on the one hand, especially the presups, the philosophy bros, the sophistrists, I suppose, they rely so heavily on the laws of logic, but
Yes.
their fundamental the most basic thing they're depending on for their nonsense to be true is a direct violation of the very first law of logic. And they haven't found a workaround yet.
Well, I don't think it's the very first. I think it's the law of non-contradiction. The first is law of identity, really. I
Right.
would say.
I think it violates the first because they're saying that Jesus has identical properties to the Father and that both have identical properties to the Holy Spirit. And that's clearly not the case.
Um, I don't think they're saying they've got identical properties to each of them. I don't think so. I think the problem comes that they're sort of saying that God is 100%, or the Father is 100% God, Jesus is 100% God, and you know the Holy Spirit is 100% God, but there's not three gods, or then don't make up part of one sort of total. They're each their own thing. That's the weird part.
Yeah, that they're 100% God, but also 33.3% of the God.
Well, that would be fine. That would be fine. But that's not what they're saying.
Yeah.
That's the weird thing. Yeah. Because it's fine. Because if you're part of something, that's fine. You know, if I make up 1/8 billionth of humankind, that's totally fine. Like, you know, I can be a human and have the same properties as, you know, different properties as other humans, but have ones in common. And then, um, um, but we're all 1/8 billionth of that complete thing. That's the weird part about the Trinity. They're not saying that each is 1/3 of God. They're saying each makes up God in totality, and you know they're each their own person. I've never understood it. I've never understood it.
Yeah, like there is a way to make it make sense. As a common, for example, that you've probably heard in your school days yourself, is if you take a person who has a kid and you say, okay, this person is himself, but he is also his father's son and his son's father. So he is both
Yes,
an individual and a father and a son. So he's all three of those things, those distinct identities, but is
right.
one being.
Yes.
So there is a way to do it. It just hasn't been done in religion, or at least in this religion.
Well, that's the opposite, though. You're really taking attributes and saying, hey, they each have this attribute that is the same, but it's still only one person. In this one, it's the opposite way round. It's saying that you've got these three people and they each have this one attribute that's exclusive to them, which doesn't work.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I mean, well, in fairness, they did try to put this together before the laws of logic were formalized, so
Yeah.
details.
Sounds like Jesus is claiming to have glory with the Father before the world began. Doesn't sound like he's claiming to be a regular guy. Doesn't sound like.
Yeah, okay, so that's where the straw man comes in. He could be a special favorite of God's. He could be an angel. He could be a demigod. He could even be the son of God and still not be God. Like
Mhm.
you've show that he's claiming to be God. So what David's setting up here is he's basically got a straw man of Alex's position, which is, hey, if he's not claiming to be God, if you're saying that God thinks that everybody can be gods, then you're saying Jesus is an ordinary person. Whereas Alex said nothing of the sort, right? Like he said nothing of the sort. it doesn't get you to Jesus claiming to be God.
Yeah, Jesus
Doesn't get you there.
can claim to be immortal. He can claim to be undying. He can claim that he will resurrect from the dead. None of it means he is God. He has
Right.
it's a separate claim.
It's a non sequitur because basically you're trying to say, well, Jesus can't be ordinary. He's got to be extraordinary. Okay, but where is he claiming to be God? Like this is the problem. That you're sort of, it reminds me of those times where you're talking about, say, abiogenesis or whatever, something like that. And they're saying, well, you know, it's not natural that humankind arose, so it has to be a god. No, no. That's a false dichotomy, right? That is a false dichotomy. It could have been other things, but not a god. Like it could be aliens, it could be magic, it could be all these other supernatural things that are not natural, but not a god. And I feel like David's doing the same thing. He's saying, well, if Jesus wasn't an ordinary person, then he must be God. That's a false dichotomy because there are plenty of extraordinary things that can be described that are not gods.
Like he's saying, oh, you guys are just misunderstanding everything I said. It's just one big misunderstanding. So what Jesus does, we've looked at it. I think he said he's going to.
What Jesus does?
What that Jesus do?
Well, what would Jesus do? That's what I'm asking. Absolutely never. It's weird. Like is people doing things a claim? Does that get to the heart of the debate at all? Does that actually go to the crux of the, like, even if Jesus did stuff that, and unless he's doing, like, I don't know, creating universes, I think that we're not getting to whether he's a god or not.
Well, I mean, he's taking existing loaves and fishes and making more loaves and fishes. Of course, St. Nicholas does the same thing centuries later and does it more than Jesus does, but details. He's like hovering over the waters the same way Yahweh does. That's never mind.
Well, I mean, I've seen Chris Angel do that, and I mean, you know, come on now. The walking on water trick.
He forgives sins, which is a thing only every priest. Never mind.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's something he'll bring up.
My Unfinished super chat for $6.66 again. Thank you, My Unfinished Journey. I really appreciate it. Let me know if the unfinished super chat is annoying you. I really, you know, I just, it's all good, mate. All good. What does a tricorder do? Whatever the plot requires. Yeah, that is absolutely true. Actually, a Star Trek tricorder. You know, and it's funny as it sort of went through seasons and iterations and things. It both gained and lost functionality depending on what the plot required, kind of thing. Like, you know, like, why couldn't they just use the tricorder and scan that to say, oh, it can't do that all of a sudden. It's funny. Is God's one or three? Trinity, whatever the plot requires. Hail Nero. Hail. Yeah. Yeah, and I think Bob's got a point here. I think that David's on the back foot. I think he really is on the back foot. I think that sort of Alex came in with sort of some very good Bible passages, and I think he really is on the back foot. And he's sort of trying to make it into this dichotomy of Jesus ordinary or Jesus God. And I don't think that is a good tactic to take. I really don't.
On the plus
but
side,
let's find out. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I'll give him some credit that he's not doing that pretend Bayesian bullshit that seems to have taken the apologetics world by storm recently, where he'll say something like, well, what's our confidence in the probability of the likelihood based on these totally arbitrary priors that this thing be, you know, he's trying to say the thing is true, you know?
Yeah, I mean, Bayesian analysis is a thing. I'll grant it for what it is. A sonic screwdriver. Yeah, no, that's fair. That is fair.
I have one of those around here somewhere.
I'd say the sonic screwdriver is even more plot driven, to be honest with you.
Oh, it doesn't work on
Contentious,
wood.
maybe.
It's a screwdriver that doesn't work on wood. What the hell?
Yeah. Yeah, I forgot what I was saying. That's okay. I got distracted.
Respond to it. So what does Jesus do? He's the judge. He's the final judge of all people, according to him. Again, the Old Testament says that Yahweh is the one who's going to sit on his throne in judgment. Jesus said, yeah, that's me. The Old Testament says that Yahweh is the one who raises the dead. Jesus says that he's the one who raises the dead at the resurrection. The people in their graves are going to hear the voice of the Son of God. Now that is very strange if that's how we all are. We're all going to be raised from the dead by the Son of God. If that's him saying, we're all just the same and we can all, you'll be in me and I'll be in you. Very strange way of putting things.
Yeah, I mean, but didn't sort of other people get raised? Didn't raising from the dead was something that other prophets and sort of people did?
Yeah, that happened a few times. But also, notice how before he was bringing up specific Bible quotes and saying this is where Jesus does. Now he's just at there is a passage somewhere where Jesus says a thing. Are we misrepresenting our passages, David? But setting that aside, he also says, Jesus says, the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God. That's that prophetic speaking again. It's not Jesus saying, they'll hear my voice of the Son of God. He's saying they will hear the voice of the Son of God, whoever that happens to be.
What his friends say. Now, this is interesting. Alex quotes Stephen in Acts 7. Now, this is an awesome passage because this kind of proves everything I was saying in my opening statement. Look at this. So, Stephen,
your hearts and ears are still uncircumcised? I would hope so. What? Okay. I shouldn't really be surprised by weird quotes from the Bible, because once you get into it, like, some weird stuff comes out of that book, seriously. But, okay.
rebukes the Jewish leaders in the harshest terms you can possibly rebuke someone. Watch what he says. You stiff-necked people, your hearts and ears are still uncircumcised. You are just like your ancestors. You always resist the Holy Spirit. Was there ever a prophet your ancestors did not persecute? They even killed those who predicted the coming of the righteous one, and now you have betrayed and murdered him, you who have received the law that was given through angels but have not obeyed it.
How does that get to God? He says the coming of the righteous one. Was there ever a prophet your ancestors did not persecute? So this is Acts, which is Stephen writing about Jesus, right?
It's a Luke, probably. But even so,
Luke,
like,
right.
whoever the speaker is talking to, first of all, it's a jump to conclude that they're referring to Jesus when they say righteous one. Maybe it is, but maybe not. But saying righteous one is not the same as saying God, same way saying angels isn't saying God,
Right. Like, it seems like David seems to be in a debate, which is kind of, was Jesus an ordinary person according to the Bible? That seems to be the debate that he's in, whereas the debate topic is, did Jesus claim to be God? Number one, this is Luke talking, not Jesus. Or it was Stephen talking, recorded by Luke. So it's even one more step removed. Number two, in nowhere does it say that he was God. I'm really baffled as to how this gets to the heart of the matter. And it does suggest to me that they're saying he's a prophet, right? Not a god. It says, was there ever a prophet your ancestors did not persecute? To me, that kind of suggests he's saying that, hey, this righteous one was a prophet. You have received the law that was given through angels but have not obeyed it. Yeah, no, it doesn't say anything about a god in there.
And also accusing them of betraying and murdering him. Interesting. So this would be a passage that the Islam would really like, because this is entirely in keeping with the Quranic view of who Jesus was, assuming righteous one means Jesus.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's grant that for the sake of argument. Let's just say it is. It still doesn't get to anybody claiming he's a god. And it sure as hell doesn't get to Jesus himself claiming to be a god. Because it's not Jesus saying this. Even if all of that was, you could grant all of this and say, hey, righteous one meets God. It's talking about Jesus being God. It doesn't get to Jesus claiming to be God. But I wouldn't even grant that. I don't think righteous one means a god. And that saying, was there ever a prophet your ancestors did not persecute? I would say that he's talking about prophets, not gods.
Indeed. Unless all the prophets are also God, maybe?
I mean, he could just say that and say that every human has the capacity to be a prophet and therefore God. But, that goes against David's theology, so he'll never win the debate in that way and still hold on to the same version of theology that he's got, like ever. Because, I mean, Alex served that up to him on a silver platter. He could just say, hey, yeah, everybody's got the capacity to be God, and so Jesus was God, as could we all be. And that would just be the debate in a nutshell. But, I think Alex knew he'd never say that.
That is absolutely brutal. Guess what? They get mad, they don't get violent. That's what happens. When the members of the Sanhedrin heard this, they were furious and gnashed their teeth at him. But Stephen, full of the Holy Spirit, looked up to heaven. Have they gotten violent yet? Looked up to heaven and saw the glory of God and Jesus standing at the right hand of God. Look, he said, I see heaven open and the Son of Man, remember that? The Son of Man standing at the right hand of God. Oh, you got God and then just someone else.
Still
How many
not
powers
God.
in heaven?
Okay. He's standing at the right hand of God. Okay, but didn't the angels stand with God as well? I mean, I don't, this still doesn't claim that. So number one, this doesn't get to Jesus is God, right? And that's number one. Even if he is standing at the right hand of God. Okay. Here's the dichotomy that he wants to paint. Well, he's not ordinary because this guy claims he's standing with God. Okay, I'll grant you that, right? That Stephen claims he's standing at the right hand of God. Number one, that doesn't mean he is God, for a start. Number two, and here's the more crucial one, it doesn't mean that Jesus claimed that he is God. Even if Stephen claimed that he was God, how does it get you to Jesus claiming it? This is so bewildering. He wants to sort of just say, oh, well, lots of people claim that Jesus was God. Okay. That's not the debate topic.
Yeah, he's making a pretty strong case that Jesus is Satan, though. Morning and evening star, standing to God's right hand, but definitely not
man.
God, etc., etc.
Yep. Son of Man, which is man being the earthly kind of thing. Oh God, I can't type today. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
When do they get upset? Watch when they get upset. I see heaven open and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God. Two powers in heaven, and Jesus is one of them. Now watch how they react. At this, they covered their ears, and yelling at the top of their voices, they all rushed at him, dragged him out of the city, and began to stone him. Meanwhile, the witnesses laid their coats at the feet of a young man named Saul. When do they get violent? When he says Jesus is one of the two powers in heaven.
Is that what it said? It said he was standing at the right hand of God. Is that what it said? You have to make a pretty long connection in order to say, hey, he's one of the two powers in heaven. I don't know about that. And plus, even if that is true, that's what Stephen is claiming, did Jesus claim it? No. I'm so bewildered.
But that is the precise moment when they get violent. Jesus is one of the two powers in heaven. So keep in mind, this actually supports me, right? I mean, this is one of this.
Does it?
Right? No, not right. No, not right at all. because I don't think it supports that he's a power in heaven, like, because it doesn't say that. And I think you have to like do some hardcore apologetics in order to get to that point. And number two, it's not Jesus claiming anything, it's Stephen claiming it. So no, that doesn't support you. No.
It's David claiming that Luke claims that Stephen claims.
Right. Objection, hearsay.
Oh boy. But it's weird that he presents a thing and then feels this argument is so weak, he has to ask the audience, this supports me, right? It's your presentation, my guy. You chose to include it.
Well, no, I think he's using a rhetoric device kind of thing, you know, like it's very sort of incredulous that you would use this against him kind of thing. Right? Like, oh, this supports me, right? I'm not crazy, am I?
He may be crazy.
Well, that's debatable, David, but you know, for all of us, I think. But you know, right? No, not right. No, absolutely not. Because even like wow.
This is one of the early Christians who gets stoned to death for saying that Jesus is one of the two powers in heaven.
No, that's not what he got stoned to death for. He said that he was the right hand of God. You know, I don't know about that one, Chief.
And if you're thinking he's just a regular guy hanging out in heaven, first of all, you might want to check about someone being in the presence of God and what sort of person you'd have to be. But look what he. I mean, oops, do I have it? Oh, I don't have it. Right after this is when Stephen. I don't have it on slide. Right after this is when Stephen looks up and says what? Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. That just a regular guy in the presence of God up there? No, that's someone who receives the spirits of people. That a regular guy? So Alex thinks this is just God endowing someone with authority. Does not look like that. Jesus seems to be the authority here. And this.
So I think that David's got a person doing his slides for him. He doesn't seem to be using his laptop a lot for someone that's like finding all of these slides and citations, which is kind of weird. It's pretty full on, you know. Yeah, like he's got a backup guy to do his slides, I guess.
It just makes me think of Kent Hovind, especially the last Kent Hovind Kent Bloven stream that you did. And you kept calling out to your tech support guy.
Steve, the tech support guy that stole all of his money, which is hilarious to me because, you know, Ken Hovind, he really does associate with criminals a lot, and you know, he's just so angry that someone stole his money. I'm sorry, God's money. You know, it's God. Yeah. It's yeah.
Not only gets Stephen killed, this sets Paul on a rampage. Paul says, I have to wipe this stuff out. Why? We're told in the book of Acts what really sets Paul off. When Ananias is told that Paul is coming, well, Saul back then, he says that he's been told to apprehend everyone who calls on this name. Why is that an issue? Calling on the name. That's how you describe prayer in the Old Testament. Calling on the name of Yahweh. And Paul sees the Christians calling on the name of Jesus the way they're supposed to call on the name of Yahweh. Why is this relevant? Paul converts to Christianity about 2 years after the crucifixion. When is this taking place? This is not something that happens 50 or 60 years after the time of Jesus. We have Christians calling on the name of Jesus as they call on the name of Yahweh.
Wait, so he's saying it's not 50 or 60 years later, but I mean, Paul's writings was at least 30 years later. I mean, it may have been, there may have been earlier copies, maybe. We don't know for sure because we don't have or seem to have originals. So the earliest manuscripts we have for Paul is you know, his letters, and they're 30 years afterwards. So, you know, I'm not 100% sure what's he trying to say. here. I'm not 100% sure what he's trying to say.
And we can trace it to within 2 years of Jesus' crucifixion. So if this is a misunderstanding, that's a pretty big misunderstanding.
Okay, so he's saying 2 years after the crucifixion, they were calling on Jesus. And so therefore he must be God. I hate to break it to you, but they, Christians still call on Mary and other saints as well. They pray to saints occasionally.
Yeah, it's a little weird, but he's also using Acts, and the timing from Acts is supposedly based on the fact that Saul becomes Paul roughly 2 years after the crucifixion, according to the timeline chronology of the storyline or whatever. And since he's Saul in this passage, it's within that 2-year mark, which means the Christians were doing it within 2 years. But also apparently Luke was writing this within 2 years, even though he didn't actually write it until 50, 80, whatever years later than that.
Oh,
but
no,
that doesn't mean it's fictional.
Acts is later. That's like 100 years or so afterwards. We don't. We don't know whether there's an earlier copy, but like if we're talking about the manuscripts for Acts, that's believed to be written, I think, about 90 to 100 years AD. So you're not talking about something written 2 years afterwards, and we go, okay, well, that was written like in the time of Jesus, like just after he died. We're really talking about David going, well, from what it describes and the cues and what it says in the documents, we're tracing this to AD. So, it has to be accurate. No, not at all. It could have been decades after, and they could have written down an oral tradition. So there's some problems there with what he's sort of insinuating rather than the actual case of what we're finding. But even if all of this was true, even if 2 years afterwards they're calling upon Jesus, it doesn't mean Jesus claimed to be God. Like, this is the thing. It doesn't get you to even addressing the topic. All it's saying is that, hey, a lot of Christians believe that Jesus was God and claimed he was God. Great. How does that actually address the topic of did Jesus claim to be God? It doesn't. It just doesn't.
Jesus must be the worst communicator of all time.
He was pretty bad. He was pretty bad. A lot of the time he'd give some sort of parable that could be interpreted many different ways and has been over the centuries. He's pretty bad. Yeah.
Yeah, he still is, in fact. Like, every Christian I've ever spoken to says you need to have a relationship with Jesus. You need to get in touch with him. And I tried like hell, but that son of a bitch, he never calls, he never writes, he never dropped by for dinner. Maybe he's just not that into me, but he is a shit communicator.
Well, he's not into me either, so who knows. But yeah, that's a bad communicator, sure. But when you're writing down things like parables and story of this, it can be interpreted in a lot of different ways and has been. Oh boy.
Alex brings up the Septuagint responding to John. I didn't rely on the passages he's responding to, but if you want to go to the Septuagint in terms of interpreting the claims of the New Testament, let's go to Luke 6:46. Jesus says, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say?" You want to talk about the Septuagint? There's only one other place outside the Gospels where they use this Lord, Lord. That's the Septuagint, and it's a translation of Adonai Yahweh, God, Adonai Yahweh. So that's the Lord Yahweh. But in Greek, they would translate Adonai and Yahweh as Kurios. So it's Kurios in the Septuagint. And here Jesus says, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do what I say?" And so if you want to interpret Jesus based on the Septuagint claiming to be Yahweh, there you go. There it is. And it's in the Gospel of Luke.
But
I
he's
think
not
that's a
saying that. First of all, David is
no.
wrong. That isn't the only place where Jesus says, Lord, Lord. He also, just as one example to demonstrate the point, he mentions it in Matthew when he talks about all the false believers. When people say, Lord, I have cast out demons in your name, I've healed in your name, etc. And don't come to me saying, Lord, Lord, because I will say I never knew you. You know, it's the second is, this isn't Jesus saying he is Lord. It's Jesus saying, why do you call me Lord if you're not going to do what I tell you to do? Which is very different.
Hmm.
It's like when,
And plus,
people,
as yeah,
if you call
as
someone the king of Ireland, for example, and then you don't obey that person, like, do you really mean it then?
yeah. Well, I'm not convinced that just because it says Lord, Lord, that he's referring to, Yahweh in there. I would have to see a citation on that's what it actually means in the Septuagint.
It's another good point, because Lord doesn't always mean God. Sometimes it
Correct.
means the Lord of a city or my master or whatever.
Yes. Yeah, I don't yeah, mm, I don't know. I don't I've never heard that before, that, the Septuagint has Lord, Lord, and it's referring to the Lord Yahweh in there. I don't know. That's odd.
So at the end of the day, the claim is that everything is just some sort of big misunderstanding. This is very, very, very strange to me, because you're basically saying Jesus was not a good communicator.
Yeah, you already used that argument, and it could be said that, yeah, he communicated some things well and other things horrifically. I mean, David himself would say that, hey, a lot of Christians misunderstand the New Testament. I mean, Jesus didn't really communicate anything to you, David. Okay, maybe you can claim that the Holy Spirit moved within you and you have a personal relationship, but I mean, in the book, right? Jesus didn't write any of it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there isn't a gospel of Jesus. There's no writings of Jesus. There's just people writing about what Jesus said. There's no gospel of Jesus in there.
Which is itself a hell of a problem. So I've
Right.
just been idly Googling around, and as mentioned, David is wrong about that being the only other time Lord, Lord comes up.
Okay.
There's that passage in Matthew that I mentioned. There's another
Hmm.
passage in Matthew later on in Matthew, and it comes up again in Luke, not to mention the Old Testament stuff. But also there's a few different ways Lord, Lord gets broken down in the Septuagint. There's a section where Elohim gets used, but other times Elohim, not Yahweh, gets translated as Theos or God or Kyrios or Lord. So sometimes it says God and sometimes it says Lord. And it's fascinating because in some versions, depending on who's translating it and how depth their knowledge of translations are, sometimes they'll try to differentiate. And when it's
Right.
Lord, all caps, just all four letters are capitalized, they mean Yahweh. But when it's Lord with just the capital L, then they're talking about not necessarily Yahweh.
Right.
And so it's fascinating how the misunderstandings pile on top of each other to completely mangle the message.
Right. Oh, but he's a good communicator, Ember.
Mhm.
Don't, good communicator.
You think about the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount and the parable of the prodigal son and the parable of the Good Samaritan and the golden rule and so on and so on and so on. Jesus seems
There's a better golden rule, actually, but never mind. There's the
It's
negative
true.
version, which is actually superior.
He's like the best communicator of all time.
Okay, I gotta laugh, Matt. He's like the best communicator of all time. Someone in the audience just laughs their ass off, like seriously. And this is a Christian audience, so it might have been coincidence. They maybe just somebody said something funny to them, but like seriously, the best communicator of all time. Yeah, I don't think so, mate.
I mean, there's an old cartoon, for lack of a better term, like a single panel illustration where Jesus is talking to the Dalai Lama, and Jesus has like this big long speech bubble with some elaborate parable or whatever, and the Dalai Lama is like, "My guy, can you just get to the point? What are you trying to
Right.
say?" Like when the
Yes.
Dalai Lama tells you your metaphors are way too convoluted, maybe you're not great at this.
Yeah. And that's what it is. It always is convoluted and always can be taken so many different ways. Because Christians do take it so many different ways. That's the thing. It's how you get prosperity gospel and stuff like that. It's not a very good communicator, because if Jesus was a good communicator, he would have written down in a book and made it available exactly what he means, not just tell a bunch of stories to people and have people overhear it and then they write it down.
Isn't that so wild that people have this argument that Jesus is the Word, and yet we don't have a single word from Jesus?
You're buffering to me. Maybe it's my side. Could it be my side? Am I buffering to you at all?
You sound good to me.
Oh, okay. Let me know, chat. Help me out if Ember's buffering or I'm buffering or we're both buffering or the entire stream has fallen down and we're yelling out into the void. Let me know, because it may be my side, it may be Ember's side. Hell, it might just be YouTube in general. Who knows? Who knows? You see no buffering? Okay, it's probably my side then. My apologies. That's fine. That's fine. I am literally the other side of the world. Don't forget that.
More miracles.
Yeah, it's a miracle.
He's careful about what he's saying, and sometimes he unveils things in different ways, but when he makes a point, it seems people get this point. If all of his followers just seem to misunderstand him and start worshiping him and praying to him, making doxologies for him and so on.
Yeah, almost like Elvis, right? They're saying it's you, Em. That's okay.
Of course.
No, it's a disagreement. Apparently, we're bad communicators as well, because it's absolutely confusion out there. I apologize. Look, just yeah, we'll do our best. We'll do our best. If it gets horrible, just tell me. No, it's all my fault. I'll take the blame for this. Like, you know, it's all Australia. It's always Australia.
Putting their liturgy around him, then you're saying Jesus was just a terrible, terrible communicator. And
no, we're saying that people have a propensity to, when they believe in somebody, to exaggerating their feats and actions. That's all we're saying. I don't, you know, so even if the earliest one was written, say 30 years afterwards, Paul's letters, right? 30 years afterwards, that's still a long time for him to be upgraded from prophet to a god. You know, that's more than enough time for that fish story to get pretty damn big. Just like Elvis went from entertainer to angelic figure in roughly the same time.
Right.
By some people's accounts.
Yeah,
right?
it's so crazy to me that people are like, so many people describe Elvis as like this divine presence on stage, but when you watch media from the time, there were a few people who were crazy about the hip action, but most people thought he was kind of an okay singer with a gimmick.
Yeah.
That, I have to say, is the one option I cannot accept here.
I mean, he wasn't a Beatle. Or anything.
That's the option you can't accept. That like Christians just misunderstood what he was saying. Well, if he was a bad communicator, just saying, if he was a bad communicator, that would be entirely in keeping with him being a bad communicator. And if he was such a good communicator, why do you need so many schools of theology to take apart his stuff to try and figure out what the hell it means? I don't.
Why does God need a starship? Or an apologist, as the case may be. Yeah. And also, whether David can accept it or not doesn't have anything to do with whether it's true. That's just straight up incredulity. Well, you know, he must be God because I can't accept that he's a bad communicator. Okay.
And I would love for Alex at the end of this to sort of say, hey, what have we actually heard about what Jesus claimed? Right. We've had a lot of claims from Stephen, from Paul, from, you know, all of Luke, all of these different people. But what has Jesus claimed? Nothing of the sort. So I think that I kind of expected the rebuttal to be like, oh, well, he says he never claimed to be God. Yeah, okay, he's got the Lord thing. I'll grant him that yes, that was addressing the heart of the issue. But still, that wasn't Jesus. That was Stephen, Luke writing on behalf of Stephen, talking on behalf of Jesus. So I think it's a long stretch to say Jesus claimed he was God because others claimed he was God. You know, sort of, and I hate to bring it up again, but I'm reminded of the Life of Brian by Monty Python, where he's like, you know, I'm not the Messiah, you know, and then the John Cleese guy goes, you are the Messiah, and I should know. I've followed a few, you know, like, you know what I mean? Like, just because people say you are this thing doesn't, and don't forget, the Jewish people want there to be a Messiah. They want there to be the coming of the chosen one kind of thing. But how does it get you to a God? How does he's not ordinary get you to he's therefore God? None of this actually addresses the heart of the matter, the crux of the matter, what Jesus claimed he was. None of it.
Yeah. But the good news is, now it's time for Alex's rebuttal, which means for the first time in this debate, Alex gets to specifically address what David said.
Oh, and here's something else that's awesome. I do have some readerships. So are you people ready? Are you people ready?
Brace yourselves.
Boom. Take this, chat. Nice. Wow, I am hitting them today. I only see the first two. Okay, I don't. But the gifting goes out, and it is my unfinished journey, my unfinished soccer count. Jester, well, it's my unfinished journey. My unfinished super chat. Jester. What was it? Lord of Shenaniganery.
Yep.
Kirsten Mills, Eve L, Travis Statham, and I can't. I know it's been announced in live chat. I can't see the last one. Was that all of them?
I think it is. Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Did you get Eve L? Which is a great name.
I think so. Evil. Wow, I didn't even realize that was evil until I yelled it out. Wow. Okay, but. Welcome to the readerships and winner chicken dinner. Enjoy your emotes and other benefits. Please do join me for the Mark in the Dark stream, the member only stream, which is coming up, I believe, this week. I think it's on Thursday my time, Wednesday night Eastern time. I'm going to be chatting, hanging out, playing games, doing all the good stuff, doing all the good stuff. So welcome. You are green, Jester. You absolutely are green.
Oh, it's not easy being green.
It's not easy being green? Okay.
So I've heard.
I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know. I'm not green, so you know, it's yeah.
All right. So now Alex is going to go up to do his
Purposes.
12-minute rebuttal.
I should've
It
just
gets a
let
bit messy,
it
I'm
run.
afraid, ladies and gentlemen, because of course we're responding to each other at cross purposes. I respond to an opening, he responds to my opening. I sort of have to take it back a few places, but I'll try to make it interesting. We heard about the angel of Yahweh and the suggestion that this might indeed just be Jesus. It might be. Look, I don't claim to be the sort of final authority on exegesis here. I'm simply asking you to consider what you think is a more appropriate explanation. I suggested the divine name-bearing model as opposed to the two powers in heaven. And when I look at passages such as Exodus 23, verses 20 to 21, see, I am sending an angel ahead of you to guard you along the way. Pay attention to him and listen to what he says. Do not rebel against him. He will not forgive your rebellion, since my name is in him. I just ask which interpretation lends itself more nicely to the passages. David's rebuttal there seems to suggest that I was under the impression that Jesus is just some dude. That is...
Yep, he's addressing it. Yep, excellent. You're going green. Okay. Nice.
So, somewhere in the greenish range, anyway. I'm trying.
Did you know? Speaking of Kermit the Frog, did you know that because it's not easy being green was what was said in the chat by Jester. Truly isn't easy. It's not easy being green. I didn't know Jim Henson died of rabies.
What?
I think Jim Henson died of rabies. He got bitten by a dog, and that's why we have really weird sounding Muppets now. I'll double check that, but I heard that on a video, and I'm like, is that true? And I didn't have the chance to look it up.
Huh? Yeah, I can't remember. Maybe.
Oh no, it's strep. Okay, he died of strep. All right, I don't know why I thought that.
Very peculiar.
Henson was having trouble breathing when he woke up at 2 a.m. He began coughing up blood. He suggested to his wife he may be dying, but he did not want to take the time off for his schedule to visit a hospital. Dude! Feeling that his illness would resolve on its own. Come on, my guy. Seriously. Multiple abscesses in his lung. My guy, if you feel that badly, and if you cough up blood, lol, rabies. Yeah, no, I must have heard misinformation. I do apologize, but at least I checked it, Kip. And welcome, Kip. It's good to see you, buddy. If you cough up blood, go to the hospital. Seriously. I know the American health system is bad, but coughing up blood is worse. Seriously. Oof.
I'm not one to talk. We're kind of like that in the US. We're like,
yeah, I know.
I'm probably dying. Either I
Look,
die or
I'm
I
not,
don't. I can't
I'm
afford
not
it.
the best on it either, but at that point, if I say, hey, I might be dying, I'm going to the emergency room. I'll tell you that right now.
Far, far from the case, especially in John's Gospel, where Jesus seems to posit himself as something of a model of faith for his disciples. And for what it's worth, this is kind of the image that I get of Jesus reading through the Gospels. What is he supposed to be? Something like an idyllic, faithful servant of God, and certainly in a special position. If you include the epistles in particular, then Jesus is, of course, exalted. But I want to get into that, but I suppose I should turn to Philippians chapter 2, which David mentions. Of course, we're not talking of Jesus' own words anymore, but it's still quite interesting what people came to believe. The mindset of Jesus Christ, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God as something to be used to his own advantage, but rather made himself nothing, as I'm sure you all know. That word grasped there, harpagmon, or something like that. I'm not very good at pronouncing the Greek, but it means something like to steal, to seize. Isn't it a bit strange that if Jesus is God, he didn't consider equality with God as something to be seized, to be stolen? That's how that word is used in the Greek language. How can he steal something that's already rightfully his?
Okay.
And can you steal from yourself? I mean, I'm sure you can if you're really going to work out how, but to what end?
Yeah, Jessica's got a good point. In Australia, it doesn't cover dental. Everyone avoids. Yeah, and I did that. I had to have work done on my teeth because I did ignore it for a lot of time. I'm not the best with it either, so I'm a complete hypocrite. Doesn't make me wrong though. Even though I probably ignore things that I should get checked out. Yes, it's hypocritical. It doesn't make it bad advice. You know, like, that's the thing. Yeah.
I had the same situation with my kids. You know, we were talking about smoking, and I was like, yeah, it's the worst. Like, you don't want that chemical to have
Correct.
power over your life. And they're like, isn't it hypocritical though, since you smoke? And I'm like,
Yes, very.
yes, but also that's what gives me the wisdom to tell you. Like, everyone else says,
Yep.
don't smoke, it's bad for you, or don't smoke for this, don't smoke for that. No, I'm telling you, it's really hard to quit, and it controls your damn life, and you don't want that. That can only come from experience.
Right, and that's the thing about hypocrisy. It is annoying. I will grant you that. It's absolutely annoying, but it doesn't mean that the advice they're giving you is bad. In philosophy, it's called a tu quo que fallacy, which translates to "and you also," and it means that if somebody says, you know, you do that as well, it's like, yeah, and then we get into like similar things like whataboutism, like when somebody says, oh, well, this person, you know, stole money from the elderly. Well, what about this other person that did this? Well, that doesn't mean what they did was right. You know, like it's this weird thing and this weird deflection. Perhaps Jesus was buffering. Excuse me, if God's buffering, I have questions. I must say.
That would explain a lot about why we haven't seen, you know, manifestations
Yeah.
for a while.
What, been buffering for 2,000 years? It's just frozen.
Well, remember how bad the internet was 20 years ago.
Oh, that's
Imagine how bad
true.
it was 2,000 years ago.
And indeed, because he then died on the cross and humbled himself even to death, therefore he was given the name that was above all other names. Therefore, so whatever exalted position Jesus is given here in Philippians 2, and by the way, he is given it. He's given it because of his crucifixion. Therefore, he's given the name above other names. Again, which interpretation lends itself more nicely to these passages? I mean, for what it's worth, my favorite interpretation, I was discussing this the other night at dinner with, well, not with David, actually, that would be giving too much away, but it's this so-called Adamic. James Dunn has written about this, the sort of Adam Christology as applies to Philippians 2, who being in the very nature of God, this word meaning like the form of God. If we consider that Jesus is supposed to be the answer to Adam's sin and Jesus redeems, Adam is made in the image of God and considers equality with God as something to be grasped, to be seized when he takes of the fruit and eats it. And that is how man falls. So how is man redeemed? Well, Jesus Christ, though also being made in the form of a God, in the image of God, did not consider equality with God something to be seized, not him, but humbled himself. Therefore, Jesus is exalted. We're told in Hebrews chapter 2 that for a time Jesus is made lower than the angels, presumably while he's here on earth. Again, it just reads to me as if at least while on earth, Jesus is certainly not approximating Yahweh, but he's also not just some dude.
Yeah, and that's the false dichotomy, or the black and white kind of argument that David's putting across. Because you're saying that Jesus never claimed to be God, you're saying that he claimed to just be an ordinary person with no special place at all. And that's certainly, like, that is not the two options. He can be a special man, a prophet, you know, the most beloved of God. He can be claim to be all kinds of things and fall short of claiming to be God. So, you know, I like that Alex is pointing out the problem that we saw. You know, of course you wouldn't miss it. It's Alex O'Connor, but you know, it's a very good rebuttal to what he's saying.
Yeah, and that we see that mirrored in Islam too, where we've got the then current prophet proclaiming that he's a prophet. In fact, he's the best prophet, but he's still just a prophet.
Yeah.
David mentioned the glory that's given to Jesus in John chapter 17, verse 5, the same chapter that I was using. Yeah. Verse 5, Father, glorify me in the presence that I had with you before the world was created. Just keep reading John chapter 17 and see what Jesus wants to do with that glory. In fact, the very passage that I quoted, my prayer is not for them alone, I pray that all may be one, Father, just as you're in me and I'm in you. May they also be in us, blah, blah, blah. Immediately afterwards, so they may be brought into complete unity. Then they will know, I've copied the wrong passage actually, Jesus says that the glory you've given me, I will give to them in John chapter 17. He says, the glory you've given me, I will give to them, the disciples. We're told in Isaiah, in the book of...
Yeah, if he's God, why would he need glory? Yeah, okay. So if he was God, the glory would be for him, not to be passed on to somebody else, because it's, as Alex was pointing out, and you pointed out actually, Amber, it's blasphemy to assign glory to somebody other than God, right?
When it properly goes to God.
When it probably, yeah, absolutely. When it properly belongs to God, yeah. So that's interesting. Like, is there any case of God, like Yahweh, passing on glory to others? I don't think so. Like that's for Yahweh, right? That is for the God to have. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, that is it's a whole other conversation, but it does mark a pretty big distinction in the flow of glory. Like, the conquest, and the judges period and the kings, all of this stuff. The whole purpose of all of Israel is to glorify their God. Like I don't know how to describe it. Like, that's the purpose, is God deserves all glory, and everything we do, all the greatness we achieve, is to show how glorious he is. And then here's Jesus saying, you're sending glory down to me and through me to these others.
Yeah.
But that, again, that's a side conversation. It has nothing to do with the topic of the debate.
Yeah.
Isaiah, that God shares his glory with nobody. And this is sometimes a suggestion that's made, is sometimes that because Jesus says, glorify me, God, in John chapter 17, he must be God, because God shares his glory with nobody. But people just seem to forget that in the same chapter, Jesus says that he will give the glory that he has been given by the Father to the disciples too. Again, all I'm asking you to consider is, however you interpret these verses where Jesus is given glory, Jesus is given the judgment, and bear in mind that Jesus is given all of these things, what he then does with those things, and whether he delegates them to other people. Because if he does, then it's clearly not just something that can be delegated to God himself. Only God judges. Only God can judge. But Jesus says that he will judge. Jesus also promises judgment over the 12 tribes of Israel to the disciples. So are the disciples God? Jesus forgives sins, and only God can forgive sins. In John chapter 20, verse 21, he says, as the Father has sent me, again, kathos, just as the Father has sent me, I'm sending you. If you forgive people's sins, their sins will be forgiven. If you do not, their sins will be retained. I'm told that only God forgives sins, but then Jesus gives that ability to his disciples. In other words,
what do you make of that one?
It's a whole pantheon. It's just like the Psalms quote, you are all gods. He's promoting everybody. It's a mass deification. It's an apotheosis of the apostles, you might say.
Yeah. It's kind of just it's almost new agey, that God's in everybody kind of thing, and everybody is God kind of stuff. There's this whole sort of almost pantheist or panpsychist. Maybe pantheist is more accurate, but just sort of, I'm not sure how you would describe that. Obviously, that would be very contentious for the time, right? That would be insanely contentious for the time.
Or it could be that he's speaking in metaphor, like he does all the rest of the time.
Well, that's true. Yeah. Yeah.
Words, all of these things which are supposed to indicate that Jesus has a special relationship with God, of course he does. But it's a relationship that he hopes and literally prays that will be shared with everybody. Also, this Luke chapter 6, verse 46 thing that David put up, I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. As far as I understand, in Luke chapter 6, verse 46, when it quotes Lord, Lord, and as far as I understand, David was saying that in the Hebrew, this is presumably Yahweh Adonai, right? Is that right, David? Yahweh Adonai in the Hebrew. Perhaps he'll address it in his second rebuttal. And then said, but in the Greek Septuagint, this is translated as Kyrios, Kyrios, because it's Lord twice. Which translation of the Old Testament are the New Testament writers using? The Septuagint. So the passage that they read will have said Kyrios, Kyrios, Lord twice. It wouldn't have said Yahweh and then Adonai, or rather the other way around, I think it is. It would have said Kyrios, Kyrios. So, of course, they're willing to use this in Luke's Gospel, because it says the same word twice, which to them just means Lord, because that's the translation that they're reading. Also, this idea that Jesus is a perfect communicator, sort of David is like mocking this idea, saying, am I supposed to understand Jesus as just being a terrible communicator? Well, if you look at the way that the Jews were interpreting him, like, kind of. At the very least, people were deeply confused.
Early Christianity had a lot of differences to it. There was a lot of difference about what things actually meant.
Everybody was confused.
Yeah,
Not just his Jewish opponents, because they were
every apostle
Right.
had their own church and tradition, and some of those got incorporated into the whole, and some of them
Right, right.
became heresies, and
Mm,
chaos ensued, much bloodshed, and it still didn't make there be just one
Yeah.
church.
hardened of heart. His disciples regularly struggled with his teachings too, asking him to expand and explain what on earth he meant. It even says at one point that Jesus was speaking in parables, so that, quoting a psalm again, they will be ever seeing, ever looking but not seeing, ever hearing but not understanding. The Gospels tell us that Jesus was speaking intentionally in such a way that people would misunderstand him. And then it says, but when he was alone with his disciples, he explained everything. So no, I don't actually think that Jesus' public ministry was entirely clear to everybody who was listening. In fact, that's part of the point. We're told that Jesus is constantly trying to hide his identity because he has to be careful about how he expresses himself, which, by the way, seems to raise a contradiction. When you consider the fact that we're told that in at least John's Gospel, Jesus is going around willy-nilly calling himself God. In the full view of his disciples and also his opponents, he invokes the divine name, and anybody listening would have completely understood what he was saying. And yet throughout the Synoptic Gospels, there is a motif, the Messianic secret, so it's called, that every time he reveals his identity, he tells them not to tell anybody. Don't tell them I'm the Messiah. But it's fine for them to know that I'm God. I don't know about that.
That's a good point.
Checks out.
That's a really good point. If he didn't want them to, know that he was claiming to be the Messiah, then he certainly wouldn't want them to know that he was claiming to be God. But against Alex here, to be fair, it's not necessary that he claimed to be God publicly, right?
Technically
It's
correct.
enough that if he, right, because the topic of the debate is, did he claim to be God? Even if that was sort of to his disciples and they later wrote it down, if he did do that, then, he would have been claiming to be God. But I don't see anything that sort of says that.
I think the best way of understanding who Jesus is like I say, a sort of idyllic human being. Take when Jesus walks on the water, for example. Another example that's often given as a high Christological moment, because of course in Job 9 it says that only God treads upon the waves of the ocean. Sure, but people then also forget that Peter also walks on the water just afterwards. But Peter starts sinking, and Jesus says, you don't have enough faith. What does that imply? That if Peter had enough faith, he could have kept walking on the water. What are we to take from this? If Jesus is supposed to be God because he walks on the water, but then Peter walks on the water too.
And Chris Angel walks on the water. I've seen it. All right, I'm pretty sure it was fake, but I've seen it.
I mean, there's
don't
a
think
few
that's a very
people
good
who've done it with various magics or trickeries or what have you. Yeah.
Look, usually it's just sort of transparent polyethylene or something, poly, some kind of plastic, transparent plastic, and all of the people that are in the pool amazed are just actors. That's usually how it's done.
Yeah, I mean, I've done it myself by finding a sheet of ice and then just putting a little bit of water on top of it, because then it looks like the whole thing is water, but I'm actually just walking on the ice.
Yeah. But I've seen the Chris Angel thing. He's basically, he was a magician that came out. What was his show? It was like Mind Freak or something, and he was just like the corniest magician ever, with just being edgy basically, and that it was explained to me, like they did a thing on it. It's like, the walking on water that he did, just all of the people in the pool that he walked across, they're just paid actors.
You can accomplish a lot when you pay your minions. I wonder if Jesus did that. I mean,
maybe
he had shekels to throw around. Apparently.
Well, apparently he had Joseph of Arimathea just buying him tombs willy-nilly, so yeah.
Interpretation. In other words, we're told that God forgives sins, but then the disciples are given the authority to forgive sins in John chapter 20. We're told only God walks on the water, but then Peter does this immediately afterwards. We're told that only God can have the authority to judge, as David says, but the disciples are promised judgment over the 12 tribes of Israel. That's not the only time the judgment is delegated, by the way. We're told that Jesus explicitly claims identity with God by saying he and the Father are one. But then Jesus prays that his disciples will be one in the same way. We're told that God will share his glory with nobody else, but Jesus claims to have had glory with the Father before he was born. But Jesus then says he wants to share that glory with the disciples. We're told that Jesus only rightly accepts worship. This is interesting, by the way. David flashed on a few passages of Jesus accepting worship in the Gospels. The word most commonly translated as worship in the New Testament is proskuneo, which means to bow down or prostrate before a higher authority. And of course, Jesus received this proskuneo worship, therefore he must be God. If that is the case, then we have to consider the fact that David in the Septuagint, for example, bows down proskuneo before Esau, that Joseph's brothers proskuneo before him when he's governor of Egypt, that the entire nation of Israel offers proskuneo worship to King David as well.
Whoops. Oh dear, David. Oh dear, David Wood. Yeah, okay. That was a major point of David's, that people worship Jesus. But if that's the word and it just means to sort of bow in deference kind of thing, then yeah, apparently King David is a god as well.
That's why there's that psalm there, because it's
Right.
so ubiquitous, you may as well just say everyone is a god then.
Yeah.
That Lot proskuneo before two angels. Proskuneo is littered throughout the Old and also the New Testament, by the way. In the parable of the unmerciful servant, when one of the servants returns, he offers proskuneo to his master. And this is a story that Jesus is saying. Also, let's not forget that in Revelation, Jesus promises that his true followers, their enemies, will proskuneo worship before them. Jesus himself in Revelation is saying that human beings will receive proskuneo worship. If proskuneo worship is something that only God can receive, then all of these people sinned. All of them. The entire assembly of Israel sinned when they bowed down before David. I don't think that's a good interpretation. There is another word that's sometimes translated as worship, which is latruo. This is religious cultic worship that is only offered to God. Nowhere in the Gospels is this offered to Jesus. How many times is proskuneo worship? How many times is any kind of worship accepted by Jesus in Luke's Gospel? Does anybody know? 0. The word comes up 3 times. Twice in the temptation of the desert where it's discussed, and once at the end after Jesus has ascended so he can say nothing about it, and in a verse that's contested in our manuscript traditions. How many times in Mark does Jesus accept worship? This time the answer is 2, but one of those is the demon Legion, that's usually translated as throws himself at his feet before Jesus. And the other is when the Roman soldiers mockingly worship Jesus. They offer proskuneo. Why? Because he's the king of the Jews. Because proskuneo worship is something offered to kings, higher authorities. I'll keep going perhaps in my further rebuttal, but if worship is something that is only due to God, then there are a lot more sinners in the Bible than we think.
Or a lot more gods running around.
So many gods, so little time.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I think he just absolutely destroyed David with his. He's really doing a number on him with Bible knowledge here. It's not, I mean, they're both, I believe they have backgrounds in philosophy, but I think Alex is showing why he is a better counter apologist than David is an apologist, because he understands the Bible better, which is amazing. I'm really impressed. Wow. That's fascinating. Wow, what a guy.
Mm-hmm.
Cornelius proskuneos Peter in Acts. Well, look, I'm not a judge of anyone's private life. Yeah.
I was thinking about the feet washing thing as a kind of symbolic form of worship, but again, that always brings us back to, do they really mean feet washing though?
What else could they mean? I didn't know what else that meant.
Oh, there's an argument to be made that every time it talks about foot washing, it's referencing another part of the anatomy, because in other parts of the Bible, it refers to that part of the anatomy as the feet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Well, look, what's a little, junk scrubbing between bros? Let's be fair. Let's be fair. Who hasn't?
I mean, so sometimes you've got a stain that you just have to rub out.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so now David Wood is going to do his second 6-minute rebuttal, and then that'll be followed up by Alex's 6-minute rebuttal.
All right, Alex says we're looking for the best explanation. I would submit that the best explanation for Jesus claiming to be one of the 2 powers in heaven, and for claiming to do things like judge the world and raised the dead at the resurrection, and for why his followers are praying to him and worshiping him and calling him God and the Son of God and doing the same thing, doing the exact same thing that Jesus does, namely claiming to be one of the two powers in heaven, and for his enemies to repeatedly accuse him of blasphemy, ultimately sentence him to death. And then people who say the same thing, like Stephen, also find themselves being executed. I would say that the best explanation of that is Jesus was claiming to be God.
I don't know about that, sir.
I mean, this is such apologetic bullshit. It's here's a thing I've misrepresented, and here's a thing I've deliberately misunderstood, and here's a thing that doesn't say what I say it said, and the best explanation is X, which is a thing that you
Yeah.
should be able to just demonstrate if it were true. You wouldn't have to
Right.
build up a case. You could just show it. Fuck.
Well, it's like all apologetics. He's kind of starting with the conclusion first and trying to get the evidence to support it later. That he has that idea that, hey, that is the conclusion that I have. You know, I think that sort of saying, hey, the best explanation, he could have been running around making statements that were antithetical to the teachings of the priesthood and still be found guilty of blasphemy. Because don't forget, a lot of the things in those, especially the Old Testament laws, what was the punishment for them? Like even working on a Sabbath day, what was the punishment for that?
Well, it depends on who is carrying out the punishment. If Yahweh did it, smote, you're just poof. But
Right.
if the community does it, I believe that one was stones.
Stoning to death, right? So the
Oh, okay.
punishment for a lot of these transgressions was death, right? You know, sort of so saying, hey, why did he get accused, found guilty of blasphemy, and put to the death? The most likely explanation is because he claimed to be God. He would not have had to do something that egregious in order to be killed for blasphemy. All I'm saying is that there was a wide range of offenses that you could meet your end for, you know, under the law in the Old Testament.
Yeah, lots of other lesser crimes that would get you banished or, you know, all sorts of fun things. But
Mhm.
to turn that around, David could also make this super flexible, not really a strong foundation case in entirely the opposite direction. He could, you know, point out things like Jesus went into the temple and flipped over the tables and chased people with a whip. And who else
Right.
would do that but God? Because it's God's house. If he's not God, he risks pissing off Yahweh and being smote on the spot, which is basically the same as saying, I am God. I mean, it's the same
Yeah.
argument, just the other way, you know?
Mhm. And you know, didn't Jesus say that God is not found in the houses of men? I was pretty sure he said that. Anyway, who knows?
That's just me. It's like if I met like five. Suppose I never heard a word from Alex, but I meet like five of his biggest fans, and they say, "Yeah, we love Alex. He's the Messiah." And then I run into five of his harsh.
Well, wait, the Messiah isn't necessarily God, right? Like, that's
Yeah.
the thing. Like, the Messiah's the anointed one, and that doesn't mean that, like, so the Jews, they don't think the Messiah is God.
Mm-hmm. And that's another one of those blinders from the evangelicalism. It
Right,
doesn't occur to David that to everyone else, Messiah and incarnation of God are not the same thing.
right.
Just critics, and they say, "Man, we can't stand that dude Alex. He thinks he's the Messiah." Even if I never heard a word from Alex, I'd be thinking he was claiming to be something like that, and that's what's giving his friends and enemies that indication. Likewise with Jesus, even if I didn't have any words with Jesus, if I just knew these guys were people were being put to death for making these kinds of claims, and that his followers are going around worshiping him and praying to him, I would think he's saying something.
But were they praying to him? Because as Alex pointed out, you got the wrong translation of a word to mean worship when it means to sort of prostrate yourself in submission or to acknowledge the authority of somebody, as he pointed out. So I don't, proskuneo. I don't proskunios. So I don't know that they're actually worshiping him in the same way that you're trying to make out. And plus, even the idea of worship is probably different back then than it is today. You know what I mean? Like today, our sort of religious, humankind in general's religious ceremonies would probably be completely foreign to people back in those days. They would not understand what they're doing at all. So
Yeah, the
I'm not
whole
100%
ritual
sure
of eating crackers at the altar call, or depending
Right.
on your religion, whatever. Shoot, I'm thinking back to a time when a Muslim invited me to join him for morning prayer, and it was a really peaceful experience. It was very nice.
Right.
And
Right.
there's the format of the ritual, like the mat has to be facing towards Mecca, which in this case was east, and you have to like get your forehead right onto the mat and clear your mind and all these different things. But that's I don't know how to describe it. Like, following the steps of the ritual is just to get you into the correct mindset. It's not
Right.
necessarily a critical part of the ritual, because Allah is everywhere. Face
Right.
is just ritual, and
Yeah.
it's the same sort of thing. You don't I don't know. I'm
I don't know.
distracted by
Yeah.
the other thought in my head, like this concept of bowing to a king, showing respect and submission is somehow a form of worship. It's just
Yeah, it's weird.
Now, Alex apparently thinks that the best explanation is this divine name-bearing scenario. If so, Jesus did a really terrible job of getting that message across, and it doesn't seem like anyone really got the point unless we do some creative interpretations of some passages. Alex again quotes Exodus to say that the angel of the Lord is just some representative who bears the name. Again, I quoted the exact same book he quoted, where Yahweh says that I'm not going along with you anymore, which is Yahweh saying that he was the angel of the Lord who was guiding them.
No, that's not necessarily the case, because the way that it talks about what God says, sometimes it is relayed by an angel.
Yeah, the passage that David brought up said the opposite of that. It said, the
Correct.
angel will lead you because I'm not hanging around, you fuckers.
Yeah.
You pissed me off.
Yes. Yeah. So this whole thing and like I pointed out the example of, you can say, hey, the president ordered me to do this. It doesn't mean that the president told you that directly. It could have been an aide that said, hey, the president wants you to do this, but you would refer to it as the president ordered me, or the president said he wouldn't be going with me. But it doesn't mean necessarily that you've spoken directly to him, because the way that we sort of have authority figures hand down pronouncements, we don't, we may refer it in the shortcut, like, the king demands this, but you may never have spoken to him. It is his representative that has told you that, much in the same as, Washington has a policy on this, you're talking about the government. Well, it may not even be one individual you're talking about, and rather a group. So, I think this sort of way that David's going, well, look what the language says. And it's like, well, David, it's a translation of another language that's been put into English, and it's been edited a bit to make it more, work better. Like, come on, my guy. You can't just point to some idiosyncrasies in the language and go, well, that's definitely what it means.
Especially when it's the opposite of what you said it is. But
Right.
yeah, I'm like thinking of, like, if a king orders something. In fact, we saw a bunch of this during the European revolutions and rebellions and so forth. People would be like, well, if the king orders a thing, they might say the crown orders, because the king is doing it through the authority of the crown. But the crown doesn't actually issue orders, because it's just a it's a piece of metal. It's just chilling out doing its thing. And but that works the other way around too. Like, if someone who's speaking on behalf of the administrative regime that's running the government, they might say the crown says this, even though the king who's sitting on the throne never said any such thing.
Right. Absolutely.
He says that his view is that Jesus is presented as the ideal servant of God. The ideal servant of God convinces people to bow down and worship him and pray to him and so on. This is what the ideal servant of God would do.
Well, hang on a second. Hang on, David, back up a second. You've got to address that doesn't mean to pray to somebody. It means to adulterate them like you would a king, because King David was worshipped in the same way. So I think that, without addressing that, all you're doing is just repeating an argument that Alex has already addressed. What I want to know from David is how he explains all of the other instances of the same word being used to prostrate yourself before a king or an authority, or somebody, and the guards prostrating themselves before Jesus because he was the king of the Jews. Like, he seemed to have a very good explanation of why this particular word was used instead of another one which would have been more suitable to prayer and worship of a god. So that's what I want to know. And I'm not sure if David will get there, but I really hope he does.
That's a very strange ideal servant of God, since that's kind of precisely what you shouldn't do if you're not God. He says that proskuneo can mean bow down. Yes, the word proskuneo depends on the context. If it's a religious context, it refers to worship. But you can, yes, someone can just bow down to you out of respect, and that would be, you can bow down to a normal human. But guess what? We have clearly religious context in some of these passages. For instance, Matthew 14:33, they are freaked out. Those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." It's a different sort of context than, I want to ask you for a favor and I want to bow down out of respect.
Well, wait. Truly you are the Son of God. It doesn't say truly you are God.
I mean, on streams that are recorded and people can still view today, there have been people who've referred to each other, sometimes even me, saying, "Oh, you are a god," or "You are a goddess," or whatever the case may be. Like, saying you're the son of a god, it's one more step removed from that. That's
Right.
a thing that people have always said.
Yeah. Well, I think it's that David, maybe his theology, he sort of has it in his mind that if someone's the son of God, then they have to be God. Like, that equates to God. And maybe that's, something that he has in his theology, but I don't see why that follows. And I certainly don't see why it's Jesus claiming to be God, even if he does say he is the Son of God.
That brings up some interesting troubles. David, who's been delving into the Old Testament.
Yeah.
It makes me think of the passages in Job where it talks about the sons of God, like with a capital S, like they're not just, followers. They're not just servants. They're not just prophets.
Right.
They're literally
Right.
the sons of God.
Mm-hmm.
What do we make of that?
Well, I mean, we can make all kinds of things. That's the thing about interpretation, right? You could sort of say, hey, that's the angels perhaps, or maybe he was referring to humans in general. Apparently it's Job 1, apparently.
It happens a few times. I forget the exact
Get the KJV.
It came to my attention a little while back when I was doing a response to a Ray Comfort video, and Ray it was like 20 science facts in the Bible or whatever, and like 3 of his facts went to this one chapter in Job, and I'm like, all right, if we're gonna keep going back here, let's look at what else Job says, and the sons of God is one of the things that I'm like, why though?
So it's Job 1:6 apparently. It sort of says, now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. I think, that suggests to me that it's kind of like maybe the angels kind of thing, because Satan was an angel essentially. And this is hilarious. This is the funny part. The Lord said unto Satan, "Whence comest thou?" The Satan answered, the Lord said, "From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it." If the serpent was Satan, weren't you cursed to crawl on your belly? Shouldn't it be slithering up and down it? What? It's a bit of a weird one. Bit of a weird one.
As for Philippians 2, it sounded like he was saying, Dunn's theory, that this is just saying that when it says who was in very nature God, it's actually the form of God. But this is just saying that he was a human being, and since he found himself as a human being, like we're all the image of God, he humbled himself, and therefore he was eventually exalted, and so on. It just doesn't work. Let me just read it. Who being in very nature God, or you can just make up a translation, say image of God for fun. Who being in very nature God did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Yes, that can mean seize. It can also mean used to his advantage. You look at what makes sense in context. Did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. The decision to humble himself is what led to him being made in human likeness. This isn't a human being who's sitting around going, hey, I'm in the image of God. I could strive to be like God, like Adam did, but I'm going to humble myself instead. This is a divine being humbling himself by becoming a human being and then being found in a pit.
Wait, so was Adam God then?
Because I was just same
If
thought,
Adam-
but from a different perspective. I'm like,
Okay, what was your perspective?
This whole thing of humans are special because they're made in God's image.
Right.
So to be made in humans' image is to be made in God's image.
I would imagine so, yeah.
So it's I don't know. It's like saying A equals A and then reversing the A equals A. Oh, you're still saying A equals A,
Yeah. But well, the one that cropped up for me was he was saying, like, this is a divine being, but unlike Adam, he didn't strive to be like God, he strove to be like human. And it's like, then Adam is a god.
That it's like they're both Adam, or all the patriarchs are Adam, or it gets very confusing when you just throw out the concept of identity.
Right. And that's kind of weird because, like, and this is sort of, I mean, it's not really part of the debate, but it also brings on, like, a problem with the Trinity kind of thing. If Jesus strove to be like God, would God have cursed him like Adam was? And if so, how is he part of, how is he a, triomni God like the Father is? That's weird. That's weird.
There's a lot of weirdness.
Yeah, that's a very strange argument that Adam was divine and, that Adam is God as well. That's weird.
Appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God exalted him in the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Alex seems to think that if you're a human being and you humble yourself in this way, that God can just exalt you to the status of Yahweh and apply these passages that are just Yahweh. When Yahweh says there's no one else but me, that's what's being quoted there from Isaiah.
It's Yahweh doesn't say that though. Like even
No.
in the first commandment, it says, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me," which
Correct.
implicitly, if not explicitly, states there are other gods who are just as real and just as divine. He just wants to be first. But also, as to what he was saying earlier, Adam, right? Like the reason they get kicked out of the garden is because, according to Yahweh, by eating the fruit, they have become like the gods. He says
Yes.
to the other gods, but that they need to go so they don't get the fruit of the tree of life and become completely like the other gods, which
Yes.
kind of entails that they did not start out as co-equal gods. And also there's
Yep.
more gods. There's a lot of gods
Yep.
in the Bible.
And they're mentioned in a fair bit, yeah, in the Old Testament, these other gods, and even sort of gods of Egypt and stuff like that. Like, it's a whole free-for-all of gods out there. Now, the apologetics sort of say, well, they're not the God, the one and true God. They're, sort of explained away as either spirits or angels or demons in some way, depending on who you talk to and their interpretation of that scripture. But yeah, it's kind of odd that now he's talking about Adam being a potential god. Who else is a potential god? I don't I've never heard that before. It's strange.
Curious. Alex says, well, what would they be using? They would be using the Septuagint, the Greek translation. Yeah, and they went to a passage. They used the formulation curios, which is specifically referring to Yahweh. That's what Jesus uses. He's quoting curios. He's calling himself curios. The only other use of that is the Septuagint, where it refers to Adonai Yahweh. So why is Jesus using that? And again,
well, that wasn't his argument. He said it was Adonai Yahweh, right? Like, that's what he said. He didn't say curios.
Yeah, the Septuagint says curios. He's saying it's referring to Adonai Yahweh. Sort of, but that's not what the writers of that book were reading, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah,
like, it'd be like us saying that, well, even though the Bible we're reading in English was translated from, say, Latin, then therefore it means what the word means in Latin. But in actuality, the Latin was also a translation, you know? Like we're not directly referencing the Septuagint, we're referencing the Latinized version because that's what our version was translated from.
Right. But also, like, he's moving the goalposts as far as I know, because he sort of was saying, hey, it was Adonai Yahweh, and now he's saying, well, yeah, it says curios, but this is what they meant. I'm not 100% sure about that one, champ. And that is a big change from, So you're right. Not only would it have to the people who wrote in the Septuagint mean that, but also the people in the New Testament that were writing about Jesus would have to interpret it that way as well. You're absolutely right. Did they? I'm not 100% convinced of that. And I'm very suspicious because, David left out that it was curios, and he takes it to mean Adonai Yahweh.
Yeah.
I'm very suspicious now because that is not the same thing.
Yeah, he's doing the excusagist thing. I mean, if they could read it in the original, then they would have just done that.
Interesting.
I only brought up that point because he brought up the point about the Septuagint and using it to interpret the claims of Christ. So I said, fine, let's go with it. We got in Luke, and therefore that's him claiming to be Yahweh. Was Jesus a bad communicator? He says, but Jesus wasn't clear, and he veiled his statements. So yes, I grant all of that.
His whole first rebuttal is Jesus is the clearest communicator, and now he immediately caves. I grant all of it. He's terrible. But he's a maximally great being, and therefore maximally great at communication. But he's also a terrible communicator. Oh, fuck's sake.
I am so baffled. I'm so anxious to find out how he's going to link those things together. That, yes, he was mysterious, he was vague, he didn't spoke in parables. A lot of the time he was confusing. How are you going to tie that one in?
Jesus was a careful communicator. He was careful about how he communicated certain things. He tried to unveil certain things over time when people were ready for it. That's not what I consider a bad communicator. I consider all of that part of being a very good communicator. If you're saying that the people who all heard Jesus all got it wrong somehow, or that we don't really have the records of the people who somehow got it right, that his friends got it wrong because they continue and they build their church around him, and his enemies are sentencing him to death, I would say that's a really, really, really bad communicator, and that just does not line up. If everyone is concluding the same thing about this guy, that he's claiming to be God, that he's claiming to be one of the two powers in heaven.
What? No, the Muslims, for instance, think he's a prophet, but he's not a god. What are you talking about, my guy? I think he's got a different definition of everybody that I do.
He's still because, like, if there are two powers and he's claiming to be the one that isn't God, that claim to be God.
You're breaking up a bit for me, Ems. Is the?
I think the internet may be being rude.
I think we're being smoten by Jesus. Yeah, okay, the freak, seriously, in the chat, that's not an argument. It's not engaging with people. Don't just sort of preach in the chat, or else I'm gonna have to time you. You know I don't want to, but seriously, my guy, if you're not gonna have discussions and just say stuff, we're gonna have a bad time. We're not gonna see eye to eye on that one, mate. So it's fine to chat, it's fine to converse, but if you're just gonna say it's him in the chat, yeah, that's just preaching, mate. Stop. So you're still with us, Ems?
As far as I can
Maybe
tell.
Maybe try rejoining. Might be a good idea. That sometimes sorts me out
Yeah,
for
worth
some
a try.
reason. Yeah, it's worth a try. So stay with us. Emma will be back, definitely. And while I got you here, don't maybe take this opportunity to like, and if you're not subscribed for more debate review and amazing dissections with Ember and I. And yeah, I thank you so much for joining up. If you do want to, you can join the channel. What? Hang on, remove that. At the stage, there's 2 of you down the bottom. I don't know what that's all about. That's very weird.
Double Ember.
You're being weird. Double Ember across the sky. What does it mean? It's an old meme, sir, but it checks out. Yeah, well, we'll see how we go. Ember seems to be being smitten by Yahweh for mischaracterizing Jesus as a god.
It's
which
true.
Yeah, it's true. It's absolutely true. Yeah, this is so weird. It's kind of like, well, yeah, he's a bad communicator, but that's what makes him a good communicator. It's like, wow, everyone has the same idea. My guy, not even the Jews don't even believe he was the Messiah, much less a god. David, what? So by everybody, he means Christians. People who, by definition, think that Jesus is God. They all agree on that. Yeah, or they wouldn't be Christians, David. Holy moly. I mean, it would like be saying, well, all Muslims believe that Muhammad is the true prophet of God.
2 billion people can't be wrong.
Right. Like, yes, that is the defining feature of the religion, but you realize there's other people who aren't in the religion that don't believe it, and they have read the Bible as well. Wow, okay, okay. And we've got to at least acknowledge that the early church had an interest in promoting these ideas.
The best explanation is not some idea that no one got. The best explanation is very simple. He was making those claims. That's why we have all this evidence.
All
What
this evidence.
You gave a lot of evidence of what other people said, not so much about what Jesus said. It seemed very flimsy on the actual, even if we consider that the words that were written down by the apostles were actually the words of Jesus. They weren't, misconveyed. There was no interpolation. There was, it was directly his words. Even then, it was a bit of a flimsy sort of link to say that he claimed to be God. I think that's pretty flimsy. But we'll hear from Alex again and see.
All right. Check. Okay, so now Alex is going to do his second 6-minute rebuttal.
Yeah, I agree.
I suppose I really want to nail down on this worship point, since I was kind of getting at that at the end. And David says, yeah, proskuneo can mean just simply bowing down, but in a religious context, it means something else. Like, what do you mean? How do you know that without begging the question? Like I say, let's actually evaluate. That's what I was sort of going through. How many times proskuneo worship is given to Jesus in the New Testament? Well, at least that Jesus accepts it in the New Testament. It doesn't happen once in Luke's Gospel. It basically doesn't happen once in Mark, because it happens twice, and one of these is a demon, and one of these, which I suppose is an interesting thing to explore in itself, but one of these is them simply mocking Jesus because he's the king. Why would they consider?
So is Alex saying how do you know this was religious worship? Because it's not happening all that often. So how do you know this is religious worship?
Yeah, they should be doing it every Sunday or, Saturday if you're actually Jewish, but details.
Instead of mocking him with proskuneo worship if he was claiming to be king of the Jews. Because that's what proskuneo means. If proskuneo can mean actually worship of the kind that Latruo usually gets at, that is worship, cultic worship of a religious figure, as David suggests, here's a riddle for you. Why isn't it given to Jesus after Jesus ascends? Why isn't it that people are offering proskuneo worship after Jesus ascends, except at the moment of his ascension at the end of Luke's gospel, which, as I say, is contested in our manuscript tradition anyway? Why not? Because it refers to a physical action. Because it's not referring to worship of the kind that David wants it to be in this context. In John's gospel, which we didn't get to, how many times does Jesus accept worship? The answer again is once. Just once it happens in John chapter 9. This is the man who was born blind, who I mentioned earlier. In verse 38, he says to Jesus, "Lord, I believe," and he worshipped him. Except he doesn't say so in Papyrus 75. He doesn't say so in Codex Sinaiticus. He doesn't say so in Codex Washingtonianus. In other words, this verse isn't present in our earliest manuscripts.
Oh, and that was the interpolation I was talking about, right? So interpolation, if you're unaware of it, it's basically the early church had this habit of changing what was in the manuscripts in order to support the church and support the position that they were taking. So the most famous example is the long ending of Mark. I think it was Mark 16, wasn't it? If I'm not
everything after is 16 all the way to the end.
It's like, yeah, but it's like 9 to 20 or something in Mark 16. I'm pretty sure it's Mark 16. But anyway, there's these verses that in our earliest manuscripts, they're just not there, right? They're just absent completely. And then after a certain date, we start to see them being added. Now, before we found the earliest manuscripts, we didn't know. We thought that the long ending of Mark was just the long ending of Mark, that it was just the normal thing. But now we know that that was added to the manuscripts. So this is interpolation. It's basically, and I might add, those verses in the long ending of Mark is the handling of snakes, talking in tongues, kind of the Pentecostal stuff that they do, which is based upon stuff that was added by the church at a later date. And, that's scholarly consensus that that's what happened. So it's really fascinating that, he's talking about where, you have this worship. It seems to be in the later manuscripts, but not in the earlier ones, which leads us to believe, quite rightly, that the church added this to legitimize Jesus as a figure that is a god, which I wouldn't put it past them. Oh, the early church wouldn't do that? The early church did do that, yes. There was a lot in it for the church.
Yeah.
Still is, I guess.
There were a lot of changes for a lot of reasons, like that whole number of the beast thing that came up a few years ago, where the number of the beast had clearly been changed.
Right.
And one of the reasons was so they could identify who was using a legitimate text and who was using one of the falsified copies.
Mm-hmm. So it's really interesting, and it's kind of like these old texts. We can't, rely on them as they say, as gospel. And that's the thing. It's weird that we've entered this weird parlance where you said, well, don't treat it as gospel, where we can't treat gospel as gospel. You know what I mean? Like it is unreliable because of what has happened and the translation, all of the stuff that's happened with it. So I find it fascinating that I still get told the Bible's the most reliable book in all of history, and it's like, how is that so? Like, what is your criteria for that?
Just believe it. And also it's another tangent, so I'm not going to go down the whole thing, but like the fact that it's multiple books, that's like saying the Encyclopedia Britannica. 1996 edition is the most reliable book in all of history.
Mm.
First of all, it's not even a book. It's
Right.
lots of books, you know?
Volume. Yeah.
We're pretty confident that there are elements of the Gospels which are later interpolations, most famously the ending of Mark's Gospel, which is not in our earliest manuscripts, and the story of the adulterous woman, let he who is without sin cast the first stone, which are not in our early manuscripts. I'm interested as to whether David thinks that there are things in the Gospels which didn't actually...
Really? I didn't know that. Let he who without sin cast the first stone was not in our earliest manuscripts. They made it up.
I can't say it's surprising.
It surprises me. I didn't know that. I think it's fascinating. Like, you know, what else? I suppose, like, I saw a Bart Ehrman talk, and he was like, you know, what else has been made up that's been put in there by the church? Well, we don't know for sure. That's the thing. Like, because we don't have the originals, we don't know. And it's a very good point. Like, you can assume that everything else is you know, actually stuff that was in the original manuscripts, but we don't know that for sure, right? Because we don't have the original manuscripts to compare them with. So,
Yeah.
you know, I think that that's a really good point. Now, it might be that 90% of it is true to the original manuscripts, but we can't know that for sure.
Yeah, we can't know how much or which critical passages are affected, or perhaps most critically, remember that this is following the principle of charity. If you want to remove that and try to be as objective as possible about it, it could be the entire thing is completely made up after the fact.
Right.
We don't know. We have equal basis to say it's true, except for the parts we know are false, as to say the whole thing is false. Equally probable.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, but that he says, you know, Mark. No, people believe that Mark wrote Mark. Yeah, and that certainly is not the case. And we know that because he references Mark as a person, like he talks about Mark in the third person, like he mentions Mark in the third person. I'd rather talk about it. He mentions Mark in the third person, which it would be weird for the author to do that. You know, it'd be like writing a diary and then talking about yourself in the third person. It's a very strange thing to do. So,
Hey,
you
Bob
know,
Dole doesn't approve of talking about Bob Dole. I mean, it does happen, but what gets me for Mark, I mean, there is that, but just like there's the other passages in the various gospels where like Jesus goes off by himself to pray and the
right.
eyewitness somehow reports
Yeah.
this, you know, the same way
Okay.
Moses reports on his own death, but whatever. But
Mm.
Mark gets pinned as the earliest because there's references to it in some of the earliest external historian mentions.
Yes.
But it wasn't Josephus, it was the other one who was really, really early. I forget what his freaking name was, but
Tacitus?
it's possible. It's not super important what his name is. The point is
Okay.
that he references Mark, and that's how we pin Mark to the timeline. But the Mark he's talking about is a collection of hymns, not a narrative. So he's not talking about the Mark we have today. It's a different Mark.
Papias, apparently.
It's fun. It's trippy shit.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know anything about that. I didn't know that. But yeah, it's yeah.
happen, either because they're recorded incorrectly or because they are later interpolations. But at least in this case of worship, it seems to be a later interpolation. But at best, we've got one instance of Jesus accepting worship in John's Gospel, and our manuscript evidence seems to suggest that there's none. If worshipping Jesus is supposed to be some indication of his divinity, then why is it only Matthew's Gospel who seems to mention anything to do with worship?
And Matthew's being the Gospel where saints rose from their graves and wandered around Jerusalem, by the way, according to him, which no other Gospel writer felt was important enough to, you know, even jot a note about. So Matthew is, I mean, it isn't great, right? Like, it really is the most fantastical one of the lot, as far as I understood it. I don't know. It's yeah. it's a problem.
They all have their issues. Like the
Yeah.
mark that we do have, long ending notwithstanding, is written in exactly the format and style of Greek historical myths of the same period. Greeks, like what it's a whole thing. And then Mark is written, no, Matthew, Mark, Luke, whatever. The next one is written as a retelling of that story, except it's a real story and the plot holes get plugged. It's well, actually, there was an angel who rolled the stone away, or whatever the fuck. And then the next one comes along and we get all these crazy fucking miracles. The dead marching into town and whatnot. And finally we come to John, and John is like, oh, well, Jesus was actually born Superman. Just don't your credit. It's such a clear fish story that started out as more parable than fact in the first place.
Yeah.
And uses a term when there's another one available to indicate cultic religious worship to someone who's divine. Yet he chooses a word which just means physical prostration before someone who has a higher authority, like, I don't know, maybe the Messiah. Like, the disciples bow down and worship Jesus. At what point do you think they began to get the picture that he was God? They knew that he was the Messiah for a long time, but I genuinely don't know when David thinks they began to realize that this person was God. Do you think there might be an instance of them offering proskuneo worship to Jesus before they'd fully realized that? I think so, because proskuneo worship is a physical action that's given to people who are of a higher authority. Just
Right, like you can see people who venerate their, religious leaders today. They will, I mean, doesn't Kent Hovind get foot rubs from his followers? Yeah, there's something about him and getting foot rubs. It's weird. It's just very, very weird. He's a very weird person, but I think that some people do venerate their religious leaders like that. You know what I mean? Like, wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's people today who worship in various ways. Sometimes they send in love offerings, and sometimes they do things that are really gross.
Enough said on that. Yeah, absolutely. But you can even see with, say, the Pope, where people try to touch him and he blesses people, kind of thing. Proskuneo could be used to describe what they are doing when they meet the Pope and bow down before him to be blessed.
Yeah, kiss the ring. It's literally a phrase.
Exactly. The idea that must mean to worship as a god, well, obviously that is false. And I think Alex has done a really good job of showing that. That we do venerate and worship people, but not as gods. It does happen. By we, I mean humans in general, not me specific. I worship nothing. I'm a dirty atheist, and I'm not ashamed to admit it.
To belabor this point, in the Septuagint, here are some examples of proskuneo worship. Lot worships two angels in Genesis. Abraham worships the Hittites. Isaac blesses Jacob to have all the nations on earth worship him in Genesis. Jacob worships Esau. Joseph's brothers worship him. Abigail worships David's servants in 1 Samuel. Saul worships the dead Samuel in 1 Samuel.
Oh, wow. Okay, so David wanted to contest this point. Well, congratulations, David. You're currently being absolutely hammered into the ground because you wanted to die on this hill. This is an absolute, like, the question is, what leads David Wood to think that the proskuneo is being used in a religious context in the New Testament? As Alex has pointed out, and after Jesus rises from the dead, they use a different word, meaning the religious worship. So what makes him think this is religious worship it's referring to? I don't get. Right? I don't understand it. It just seems to be this idea of, well, he was a god, so therefore that word must mean, like the apologist thing, get your conclusion first and then fit the evidence to it.
Yeah.
Right?
Gotta love those circles. Circles are perfect,
But I I really think that Alex is doing a good job of, well, if he wants to die on this hill, let's absolutely destroy him with the amount of examples of this, as opposed to what you know, where has someone proskuneoed Yahweh? Yeah, it's weird. It's very strange. I don't know why David wants to die on this hill, but you know, you are dying on this hill, mate, because Alex is currently, well, beating you to death with examples.
The sons of prophets worship Elijah in 2 Kings. David worships the temple in Psalm 5. All the people of Israel worship King David in 1 Chronicles. This is the same term, proskuneo. If David wants to suggest that sometimes this proskuneo worship can mean cultic religious worship, even though there's another word available that people use to mean that, but it's not being used in this instance for some reason, I want to know what that distinction is and how we can know which kind of worship is being given without simply begging the question and saying that, well, when it's given to Jesus, it's obviously of the religious kind. Otherwise, as far as I'm concerned, this worship point.
Yeah, so begging the question is assuming the conclusion, exactly what I was talking about. And of course, Alex did not miss it. That he is begging the question to say, well, Jesus is a god, therefore the proskuneo, the worship, is a divine religious worship, even though there's nothing to suggest that other than your presupposed conclusion that he is a god, which is just excellent. Man, Alex is good. He's really good. Like, just amazing.
Is essentially bunk. Some of you might be thinking, hold on a second, in the temptation in the desert, Satan asks Jesus to worship him. And what does Satan say? Do you know? He says, worship, it is written, worship God and serve him only. So you're only supposed to worship God. And people say that this is an indication that any worship of anybody other than God would be immoral. That interpretation cannot be the case. Firstly, because it would condemn all of the people that I've just listed to be sinners, including the entire assembly of Israel. That can't be it. Let's look again at this passage. Jesus is quoting a passage which, by the way, he's actually changed. In the Old Testament, the passage that he's quoting says, fear God, rather than worship God. But besides the point, the word only here qualifies not the word worship, but the word serve. Worship God and serve him only. Worship here is proskuneo, which we know that Jesus can't be saying only proskuneo towards God, because all of these people, including people that Jesus talks about himself, are offered proskuneo worship. Indeed, proskuneo is worshipped, is promised to all of you in Revelation. So we know that he can't mean only worship God in that sense, but only qualifies the word serve. Worship God and serve him only. What is the word serve? Which Greek word is translated in this passage to serve? Does anybody know?
I love that he thinks that we're all going to know, like, ancient Greek. I'm sorry, it's just, Alex, I love you. Nobody knows ancient Greek in your audience right now, mate. But his enthusiasm's amazing. I really do think so. I'm sorry, I want to.
What an amazing freeze frame.
Yeah.
Promised to all of you in Revelation. So we know that he can't mean only worship God in that sense, but only qualifies the word serve. Worship God and serve him only. What is the word serve? Which Greek word is translated in this passage to serve? Does anybody know? Latruo, cultic religious worship. So this is a reaffirmation of the point. The proskuneo worship is fine, but latruo worship is something special that can only be given to God. The key text here is James Dunn's, did the early Christians worship God? And as he rightly points out, there is no talk anywhere once in the entire New Testament of latruo worship being offered to Jesus. Why not?
Excellent. You know what? If his YouTube career ever falls through, and I've got no reason to think it ever would, he would make a really good teacher or lecturer. Like, seriously, I'm not even joking. He's really good. He's really good.
Yeah, he's been at a couple events and earlier in his career. I don't know if he does it anymore, where he would give talks. In fact, one of his first really big videos wasn't a debate, but it was him when he was still a pre-grad school student of religion, talking about why he, as an atheist, feels it's worthwhile to explore religion in an academic level of depth.
Right.
And it was a pretty cool talk.
Okay, so that concludes Alex's second rebuttal round. We're going to move to open discussion. All right.
There is an open discussion. Well, did you want to do a part 3 then? Are we up for a part 3?
Yeah, we can probably do that. It's
yeah.
Open discussion is likely to get a bit more lively now that we've nailed it down to a couple of key points that they want to focus on, and then they're certainly going to go off on tangents, and we love the tangents.
I adore it. I live for them.
I mean, that's why the whole chat comes.
Yep. Well, they come for the debate, they stay for the tangents. I will say that. I will say that.
They
Love my
come just
paintings.
because Alex is pretty.
Alex is pretty. It's you, Amber. You're pretty. That's what it's all
Aw.
about, really. There you go.
Mhm.
Look, I'm really liking this debate. I think that, I mean, obviously I'm biased. I'm an atheist, but I think that really David's gotten he hasn't lost on rhetoric or logic or anything like that. He's really lost on Bible knowledge so far. That Alex seems to have a way better understanding of the actual translations and stuff. Actually, Dr. Kip Davies in the chat, and big shout out to Kip, awesome guy, really knowledgeable, was saying that Alex seems to show a genuine enthusiasm for the translations and the actual, the work that biblical scholars do. And he doesn't know if David does or not. It seems like he doesn't have the same depth of knowledge as Alex has, because he, is really talking about the original words. I think his thing of, people worshiping, I think that's dead in the water. If I was David right now, I would just shy away from that point. Just let it go. Let it go. It's dead at the moment. Unless you have something in your pocket that says that, you can tell that religious worship was offered for Jesus. At the moment, it just sounds like an apologist talking point. That, hey, this thing says worship, even though all of these other people were worshipped that were not God. And there is another word that means worship in a religious sense that wasn't used. At the moment, it really does seem like a problem, right? Like, I would just let it go, personally.
Yeah, it's I think there's a couple of different factors. David, like you said, being an apologist rather than a scholar or a linguist or whatever, he doesn't have any interest in what the various versions said and what those are derived from. He only cares about translations when he's looking for something to back up the point he's trying to make, regardless of how strong it is. As long as it looks like it supports his argument, good enough. Then we care. And we see this across the apologist sphere. That's why they're apologists and not Bible
I probably
scholars.
do a bit of that as well. Like I probably should, or I would like to have more knowledge of it. I should call into Kip's stream and watch his stuff more often, to be honest with you, because having knowledge of this stuff really is useful if you're going to start talking about religion and Christianity, for sure.
It's true.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, there's only so many hours in a day, but
Yeah,
if that's a thing you want to prioritize, then yeah, you should do that. It's one of the things that drives me a little crazy about the apologists, because like they get famous, they make shit tons of money, they sell a bunch of books, and the people who are actually invested in the religion, who truly believe, who like dedicate their lives to the service of their God and spreading his glory far and wide, they're too busy doing the scholarly homework to do that, to write the books, to go on tours, to make the excuses. I mean, there's a few, like there's that friar guy that Logic made fun of a little while back, but and Bishop Barron is constantly getting himself into pools of nonsense because instead of studying, he's out promoting. And it just, we see the same thing everywhere. There's the scientist versus the science communicator, although the science communicators tend to be a bit more honest than apologists, but it's the same sort of thing. There's the promoter versus the academic. C'est la vie.
Yeah. But I mean, there's also the problem with translation, that when you have a Bible, sometimes an English word won't be sufficient to get across the meaning of another language, and vice versa. Sometimes another word in another language won't be sufficient to get across the meaning. All language translations are approximations by nature. They are approximations. Like some words really don't translate well. Like there are some words in German, like Schadenfreude, it does not translate well across to English at all. Things like some English words don't translate well, like what's the word that means smell after rain? petrichor.
Could be.
Petrichor.
I've only been exposed to the
Yeah.
word a couple of times.
Yeah, it doesn't translate well, kind of thing. Like, it just doesn't translate, and so there's a lot of these different things. And I think David is kind of. I mean, he's doing a decent job, but I think that he really is trying to mesh any kind of and his arguments show it, any kind of exceptionality that people talk about Jesus with, like he's anything, like he said, other than ordinary, right? Like that he's somehow not just an ordinary guy as being God. And I really think that is terrible. That is a terrible argument because it is flawed. It's not sound. It doesn't follow. Because he could be an angel, he could be a mystic, he could be a magician, he could be a prophet, he could be a lot of things and not be an ordinary guy. And it seems to be hinged on these sort of interpretations that say, hey, everybody around him thought he was God because they didn't treat him like an ordinary person. And that doesn't follow.
Yeah, if you apply the same standard, like people didn't treat Solomon like an ordinary person, does that mean he's God?
Right. And Noah wasn't an ordinary person. That doesn't mean he was God. He was the most virtuous in the land for some reason.
The most virtuous of the least virtuous.
Right, exactly. He's the best of what you got, basically. So this is the thing, and as we pointed out, that's a black and white fallacy. It basically means that if it's not totally one thing, then it must be the other, and that is not true. It's a false dichotomy. So yeah, do you have any other thoughts on this? And anything else you want to mention?
Not really. I hope the open discussion goes into a wider field, because even though it is nice that they've nailed it down to a couple of key points, they're not enough to nail a case to. So I hope they
Right.
broaden it and create a more of a tapestry for us to explore. But we'll see how it goes. They do have quite a bit of time left, and I don't know if there's a Q&A later or something, but yeah. I'm not sure how much more they could have to talk about.
Not 100% sure. I mean, like I said, I didn't watch this, so I wanted to give a reaction to it, like a first reacts. I tell you that from body language at the moment, just looking at this, O'Connor Alex looks really interested, and David not so much. But that's okay. I think that Alex has done fantastically. Like, I don't think David expected him to know Greek translations and things like this. I think that he surprised me. I didn't know that his breadth of knowledge about the Bible was so deep. Very, just amazing work. Just amazing. I'm really impressed. And I mean, look, foremost, David shouldn't foremost be an apologist. I mean, foremost, he should be a philosopher, right? That's what his degree is in. It's in philosophy. So, you could say, hey, well, he's not a biblical scholar, he's a philosopher. The same is true of Alex. Alex isn't a biblical scholar, he's a philosopher. Like, first and foremost, Alex is a philosopher. That's what he does. That's what his degree's in, but so is David's. So, and I might add that
philosophy and religion.
Yeah, well, yeah, but first and foremost, he's a philosopher. Like, he does philosophy of religion, and he's a doctor of philosophy. While I think Alex only has an undergrad. I double check that, but I don't think. Does Alex have his master's?
I thought it was a master's. So. That's why he changed colleges.
Oh, I must admit, I haven't really kept up on his private life.
I know. I give less than a fuck about people's credentials. I only look them up when they become relevant.
Right. Well, this isn't sort of saying, hey, obviously, David Wood should know more or anything like that, right? All I'm saying is that if your argument is, well, David Wood isn't a biblical scholar, I guess my point is just that Alex O'Connor isn't a biblical scholar either, and David's more credentialed than Alex. That's all that I'm saying. There's very little on Alex O'Connor on the on the Wikipedia. I must say, very little.
Those dang editors.
Apparently, he's attended St. George's College and graduated degree in philosophy and theology. I don't think he is. I'm not 100% sure. I'm just curious.
I've noticed that people in the UK, not all colleges grant a precise degree.
Gotcha.
They just, a degree in X, and sometimes
That
they
includes
might say a
it,
graduate degree or something.
Yes, no, he's a graduate degree, so he does have a master's. Yes, so he's a master's in philosophy and theology. Okay, beautiful. Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. Okay, well, I mean, that was really good. And so back to your place next time. Next week at Amber's house. Yeah.
Woohoo!
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yee. It'll
won't
be.
even have to. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say it'll be the first official show that's actually on my channel for the month. So I get to do the bonus member thing as well.
Oh, the member drop.
Always fun. Yeah.
Memberships all day, every day. Love it, love it, love it.
Yeah.
No worries.
Hey, that's a
Awesome.
fun emoji too. The no worries emoji. Where is it? It's around here somewhere. No worries. There we go.
Yeah, I got to change the last one. You can't see that it says Bogan Logic, so I want to change it to the Blarney Stone because I've been using that frequently lately. The Blarney Stone defined as a magic stone with the ability to create and sustain universes and intelligibility. I've got to make that at some point. So yeah.
Yeah, it'll be pretty. I was just updating my emojis earlier today. So at some point, it's a whole thing. Not going to get into it, but members now have a special power, which members who were around for discussions of what special powers the emojis should have will know, which just amuses me because it's like secrets within secrets.
Is it voting on the emojis? Because I like voting on the emojis.
We need to get more emoji. Unless I start replacing, I may get rid of some of the ones that never get used, like the sin one, the serpent coiled around the apple. And so I might, just to give the members the opportunity to vote again.
You could have a vote on which one to drop as well.
That's true. That's true.
Open it to the public completely.
Yeah.
Who thought of an membership? I will tell you, not me, Jester, because I stole readership based upon Ember using membership. So I don't know, but definitely not me. I can tell you that for a certainty. Oh, you seem to have frozen M's. Oh, you're very frozen M's. Yeah, I presume it was you that thought up that because that's amazing. That's so good.
I think I did get a whole bunch of suggestions around the same time. I know James Miller is the one who suggested that there be a level of membership called Cinder, which there is.
Yeah. Is it spelled S-I-N? Because that's hilarious.
Oh, that's a missed opportunity. I have to go change that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, all right. Fair call.
See, now Mark has a suggestion in the bucket.
Look, I wasn't there for the original. I only came in later once it had all been set up. I'm a latecomer. I didn't come early.
I blame Amy Newman for not introducing us sooner.
Well, that's true. I've met everybody through Amy Newman. Incredible. What have you got coming up, Ems? What are you doing? What mischief are you making? around the internet?
All the mischief. I've been trying to take
All
it
of
easy
mischief.
lately because, as many of you know, I work 5 flippin' jobs, and one of them has
Yeah.
been really unfriendly to embers recently. So I'm
Yeah.
trying to scale back and like take care of myself as much as I can. I know it's a weird concept, but I'm doing my best here. But next thing for sure coming up is transpositions. I'm working on the news in between doing the things, but I may do a show at any random time. You never know. I can't think of all the things. After that is part 3 of this debate over at my place, and all my links on betterthanembry.com in case I do other stuff.
Yeah, and you can catch Ember on Transpositions doing stories about the trans community.
The good
And
news.
well, I mean, I've got the good news. Oh dear. It's like, here's the good news, you're gonna burn in hell.
Somebody actually made the connection and said, Ember, you realize that gospel means good news. Like there's all these preachers telling people how they're gonna go to hell, and you're out here actually spreading gospel in the way it was originally intended.
Yep. All right. Well, I've got what the hell have I got on? I've definitely got on the Fundamentalist Fridays. Fundamentalist fails on a Friday. It Thursday night for Eastern time, and I'll have Aimbot back again because people enjoy that, and I love talking with people on that show. That's one of my favorite shows, just because I can talk to people about what random people do and whether it's right or wrong. And yeah, it's actually hilarious. So come along if you want. It's a good time, but don't forget to be kind to yourself, be kind to each other. Actually, the Prime Minister yesterday told me off for not being kind to the person that had been defeated. So I got a scolding from the PM as well as everybody else. And I think he's right. Like, you know, there's no, if someone's been defeated and put down and they're hurt, you know, just be a bit nice to them. You know, like they're having a hard time too.
Just be nice in general.
Yeah, well, I mean, just because you're being nice to somebody doesn't mean you have to put up with their crap. Like, you know, so basically what had happened is in the election, the Conservative guy who was sort of saying some suspiciously Trumpy things, I'll put it that way, and Australia does not like that. So he not only lost the election, he lost his seat, which means he's been thrown out of Parliament, essentially. Essentially, he's been voted out of Parliament entirely, much like what happened with the Canadian government kind of thing. So, yeah, we could kick him while he's down, but, you know, be respectful and say, hey, we reject your idea of what Australia should be. Rethink your priorities, sir. We don't have to be nice to him, but, you know, let's not be nasty. And that's fair enough. That's fair enough. But thank you so much, everybody. Take care, and I will definitely see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
This old switchboard could talk. Wow. Your ears would sizzle. 1880. We take Alexander Graham Bell's invention for granted today. Perhaps we should. But isn't it incredible that millions and millions of people can talk simultaneously to practically any spot on Earth?